I have been on a series of Zooms that will not end until 2 o'clock. Jonathan, how are you?
Hey, sorry, I was on mute. Doing well. How about you?
Good. Actually, the Zoom I just came off of, we've had two calls today with CIOs of endowments. And we're going to have many more CIOs joining that Principals and CIO Council, which I think you'll appreciate. That was Denison. God, I saw North Carolina went to remote after 130 cases, and but Denison, touch wood, we'll see in a couple weeks.
Yeah, I'd be shocked if more universities don't end up shutting down the whole first semester.
Actually, one we've been in your backyard is the CIO of University of Pittsburgh, Greg Schuler.
Oh yeah, the
You
new
know
guy.
Greg?
Well, newer.
2.5 years.
I don't know him. I know his team. He joined about a year ago, I think.
Paul, might be interesting for you too, speaking of Pittsburgh. Do you know him? You're on mute.
I do not. Congratulations, Jonathan. Now that you're in my view, Jonathan started a new firm.
Thank you. Yeah, it was official as of yesterday.
Well, it's the Defiant, right?
That's correct.
So,
yeah.
So we've all been speculating why Defiant.
It's the word defiant. It's for me, it's about just the conviction to go against the norm. So a lot of the investments and things I'm doing require you to sometimes look past what other people would tell you to not do or do differently. And so for me, it's just bold conviction to move forward with what you believe is right.
So it was either between naming it Defiant or you have to be nuts.
Exactly.
Jonathan, what are you doing?
So Defiant Capital, it's a boutique asset management firm working with high net worth, ultra high net worth families on their alternatives bucket. So finding interesting investments for them and then helping with the management of the direct company investing, PE, VC, all of the above.
Great. Well, look, I think we've got a quorum. I look at everybody here as family in a way, you know, new family or old family, that, you know, or at least the most, among the most collaborative in our ecosystem. And, you know, and even I even call it my advisory board, extended advisory board for 361 firm and Alumni Connecting. So I wanted to give you an update, but also really want to empower all of you in a fashion that I think as a case study that Simon Vine has really, he had some ideas and we're supporting him to do this future of work event later today. And, you know, I think that organically we can, you know, I want to remind people of the history a bit too, so who are new to us, but all these groups here, you know, obviously ag, food and beverage and cannabis can do events together, but my goal is, and we're now at like 200 and I don't know, 250 people on the app. We actually have a good problem, and I call it just really, I'd say, I don't know what the right word is, but just trying to optimize the ecosystem. We don't want bad actors in the ecosystem, but we have you know, more and more people coming, and even this future of work event has brought on a number of new people, and it's a great theme, right? You know, what the future of, in fact, Denise is going to explain and others what it really means, and even, you know, Paul, you know, you have a business case. We all have business cases, our investments, and you sort of want to know where the mega trends are, so to speak. And so, but just nuts and bolts, what I'm really, you know, you all know the cadence of what we're doing. We're doing these weekly briefings. There'll be one more at 11 o'clock. And you will see, for example, over here, we have slides on the three rates that matter. Is it the birth rate, interest rates, and productivity rates? That'll be the theme at 11. Then we do these global conferences, the next one being in September, and then we do these deep dives. So every group, going back to here, the complaints are, oh, the breakouts aren't long enough. The idea is that you should, they can go long when you want your own break. But take Gene, you're on healthcare, right? It's time to do a healthcare deep dive, right? And talk about your themes. You had a thesis that nursing homes are going to go out of vogue, right? With COVID, or Jack. I'm not sure, Jack. What do you got on your screen there? Oh, okay. I thought you were doing something. You're always doing something unique. Or whatever it could be, we talked about doing sports and getting all the sports owners together. But what I want you to do is come out of this is knowing, I'm going to show you what we've done with Future of Work and what the case study is of sorts. And see how many people we have in this, 23. Okay. So you'll see it tomorrow, or sorry, tomorrow, it's not now today. You'll see it at 11:30, but the way this came together is, let's just say it's, pick, Tom jumped in, but if you take, consumer brands, or let's say Akash is interested in cannabis, or, Joanne in Asia, or Zach, you're interested in so many areas, from, you could shed light on the Middle East, actually UAE, he's heading to Dubai with its new, peace agreement with Israel. The idea is that whatever these subjects are, and I'll send this to you. There's a link that lets you, how can we support you to set up an event? And it's pretty basic in that we have a couple tools. I'll just show you one on LinkedIn. We create a few. We can create an event. You can see we have 201 people now. And how did that happen? Because so we can support you, we can create, let's say it's a event that you name it. We create a package for you. One package is that we can put it on the app, and we now have 250 people on the app. We can put it on LinkedIn. We also have, as you can see, I'll just throw over here. We now have the ability, we have all these LinkedIn groups, but the app groups are now growing finally. And there's so much we can do on a toolkit, but I wanted to just to see who wants to do what. But give me 2 more minutes. I'm just going to remind everybody of the history. So this is the fruition of one of those endeavors. You'll see it later today with great speakers, and they're uniting many of these groups. But I come from a history of doing alumni connecting. So I think this can be amplified. Pick an interest area where the various people have interest from the alumni side is a feeder into the ecosystem. But this is the history. For those who don't know it or remember it, I'm from a small town in Ohio, first to go to college in my family. My dad is a barber, a very good barber. He went to New York and would come back with Yankees jackets, and he knew Paul Mitchell and Vidal Sassoon, but he did not get into products, and all the people he trained in the going down the road. It was a terrible industry to be in, fun but tough business. But he was very international, loved to travel, and he inspired me. So I ended up going to Denison down the road on a scholarship, was very well mentored, went to Michigan Law, studied abroad at Leiden, also INSEAD. And so I then practiced, then went to Russia, Price Waterhouse, Arthur Andersen, Ernst & Young, and the one firm comes from Arthur Andersen. Partnered with a family office, invested mainly into direct deals, then later into funds. learned a lot about doing that. And then finally, we invested into a bank, had a blank sheet of paper after selling that. And I was just telling Dennison CIO that what I did starting in 2004, I went to an event in New York. Being from Ohio, I was like, oh, Dennison event, great. And it was like an event where you had to like push yourself into the conversation. So I decided to create the antithesis of that event, where we had a round table, and it grew from 7 to 20 to 30 to 50 to 300. And then we took it on the road, took to Philly, took it to San Francisco, then eventually to London. And then eventually, as you'll see here, we took it through Asia with Michigan. And then in the mornings after, I would have family office conferences, round tables, and that all led to learning this. This is, the asset classes that we're all looking at. There's the public side that's for some reason is not here. I think it's a dated material, but what I found is that I had a proof of concept where we got involved with a Series A for a venture fund that we were raising money for. And that led to quickly raising debt for them within 35 days from a debt fund that we work with. And I found that instead of my family office spending, we had to hire an army to become basically a private equity shop. It's much smarter to work with funds. And now we raise money for funds. But along the way, we've been doing these alumni. And the alumni, the schools just don't serve their alumni. They're trying to milk the cow, not feed the cow. And I would tell that to Michigan's president and Dennison's president. And they can be great feeders of, because it's powerful. You all know from your alumni platforms, if you can get with a fellow Columbia grad, or I spent time in Fontainebleau and INSEAD, there's a shared experience. There's a shared experience by being an Anderson partner, an EY partner, or Goldman, or if you're a CFA. And so we're allowing for those feeders to come in through LinkedIn now into our app. And then, I've been trying to emphasize this. We're going to emphasize it more and more, the alumni groups. I know most of you probably come in this through your own interest groups, but these apps allow us to self-identify what our interests are. And if you haven't gotten on, there's a video and everything else. But let me pause. I wanted to just hear what we just had this conversation with Dennison CIO, and we were talking about the platform, but what it enables us to do is to get their attention and listen. So I'd like to, otherwise, the whole point is we have a potential to really collaborate, technology, events, offline, hopefully again soon in person, but what is it that you all would like to do so that we are responsive to things that are interesting to all of you? So and I can also answer questions on the specifics. Don't all speak at once.
Hey, Mark, this is Gene.
Mark.
So I think, the subgroups are a great idea, and I'm honored to have the opportunity to try to lead one on healthcare. And there's lots I'm passionate about, lots I know about, lots I don't know about. And connecting with people on your calls has been great because I learn a lot about things I don't know about, and I also get to talk about things I'm passionate about. So, kudos to you for the platform for doing that. I think my challenge initially was sort of being unsure how to do it, and I think you've come a long way in helping us with that. So that's very helpful. I think my next challenge is I just worry about starting something I can't keep up, and that's my only concern really, is that if I start something, I worry that I'm going to get into making a commitment I can't keep. So one of the things I'm thinking about is recruiting a partner, so somebody else in healthcare that we can sort of do this together with.
Well, here's my vision is there should be 20 plus co-leaders to be a vibrant, right. And this is, I did this with Dennison. Dennison was my canvas. You'd have to understand Dennison to know why I could do what I did. And I invited everyone to be a co-leader at an event. We got 300 people. And I don't know, I might not show up. I might be busy. My kids have things going on. so it doesn't rest on your shoulders. So right here, this is a shared sheet. You don't have to put your emails in here. It's up to you. I'll throw it into the chat. Through this sheet, if you now, oh, I sent it to Anita, not to everyone. 1 second. You can do a couple things. You can, again, and you can be co-leaders of multiple events. I just, right now, this sheet are multiple groups. You know, John D'Agostini is a banker at Jones Trading, does a lot of biotech. Kevin is an investor and fractional CFO. Chris Wood, you know, is close to the Lurie family and Sam Zell. Mark Young, you know, this sort of goes back to one thing I'll just point out. I think I'm a big believer in this set of two-way streets where the fund managers, it's not just family offices, it's really funds and family offices and strategic advisors, people like you. You're part of a fund, but you're also a strategic advisor. You need C-suite talent in there. So all these people share that interest. Fund managers, this biotech, family office, hedge fund, Rob Horowitz, single family, that more devices, but great insight into the whole supply chain system, into hospitals. Victor has been on our, you know, been focusing on basically medical telemedicine. Gail Page, who has a virus, or sorry, a test. So she's a CEO of a testing company, or a company that has testing. This is a $1 billion+ family office that has an oncology company that it's trying to hit, you know, and they represent, by the way, this problem. A lot of families forget to, they get enamored by the deals, and then he should not be leading, and he will admit, Jeff, that an oncology company, Series A, that was a wrong move. You need to be partnering with funds that really understand it. But back to, you know, this is all part of the collaborative process. So all these people so far, and then are in healthcare one way or another, and are leaning in. And so what we do, it's like we're about to have a series. I'm just going to catalyze it. I'm going to say healthcare co-leaders. We're going to meet on, you know, next Thursday, and then I'm going to say, you know, consumer or cannabis. I'm just going to encourage the leaders to sort of, you know, and then and give you our tool set. Our team can support you, sending out all the calendar invites, all the rest, so that, you know, just like with the Asia panel track that Francis Basilino put together, whatever it is, we can give you the tool set to get, it's not resting on your shoulders, I guess is my point. And I apologize, we're so busy putting this future of work, but I think you'll see it's a case study that I didn't give you the point 1 to, you know, to 20. Here's the 20 steps you need to do to launch your group. I will do that this week, and then maybe that'll be clear for everybody.
You know, hey, Mark, this is really helpful. I mean, the idea that there's 20 co-leaders is very encouraging to me, because I think it may be just up to me to get the ball started.
That's all it is.
That's something I can do, and then if it has the energy, then people will be there, and then we'll figure it out. So and if I can't make a couple meetings because I've got conflicts, it will live on without me, and it won't depend on me. So I get that. That makes a lot of sense.
That's right. And the fun is where you could team with the future of work group, right? Like you know, Denise with their thumbs up.
Cannabis and healthcare. It's a pretty good combination.
Yeah. Well, we've got something. I don't know if Joe Zaro's on. I think he's on with the Dennison CIO still. We've got something really cool going on, and two things in cannabis that hit that, you know, and then the impact group, of course, you know, and if it's early stage, then Torrin, who's on the call, might be interested in looking at it.
I like cannabis and future work. It sounds very exciting.
It sounds, well, anyways, But you know what? But so I'll give you, I promised a playbook I didn't deliver, but I'm delivering you a case study that if you all see, and maybe Simon, you can just, why don't you just share what did it, how did you put this together and how did we work, what worked, what didn't work in putting this together?
Number one, technically, I couldn't figure out how to work with the team. This is something which is an interesting thing. I'm a person who likes procedures and protocols, so we can probably develop a protocol how to do it. Number two, it is important to visualize the impact of digital age. We need to create the formats which would fit phones, laptops, and be easy for people, for the audience to understand. I think it is very important to work with the speakers and share your vision, but also vision is the wrong word probably, actually share the format and share the understanding of the audience. And I think it was important that I kind of knew a little bit about the field, because it would be very difficult to bring people like Denise to talk to me if they didn't believe that I knew and I was really interested in the field. So other than that, you know, it's a lot of enthusiasm and everything comes together at the very last moment, as always.
So my perspective is, as I encourage Simon to, you know, whatever it is you want, you know, as long as, you know, we talked about, we probably had 3 conversations to shape this, but, you know, we said, you know, come up with some keynotes, you know, and we still stay true to our spirit of the 360s. We're having breakouts so that people can interact and discuss. And you know, we have a panel where Tom and Karsten will sort of help ask those speakers to, you know, share, you know, or at least answer some questions. And then we have our town hall debrief. So I believe, you don't always have to have breakouts or town hall debriefs, but the protocols, you're now in charge, Simon. I'm now deputizing you, because that's what I'm good at stirring the soup. And I've got people like Caitlin and others that you've met along the way that will help us. And I think I can give you the outline of the protocols, and then we can, the app itself also is going to be very helpful in that regard.
Hey, Mark, I have a question on the app.
Mm-hmm.
Who is
this?
This is Torin Kutnick.
Hi, Torin. Yeah.
So, you know, I was actually, I emailed Joe about this earlier this week. You know, I had a deal come across my desk and 90%, you know, is in my wheelhouse. And there was a question on industrials and steel. And, you know, I was looking through the app, you know, maybe there's someone in the app I could, you know, talk to about this. And I wasn't quite sure how to find someone. So I ended up just emailing Joe, and he obviously, you know, knew who I should, you know, talk to. Is there a better way to do that? And when is it sort of appropriate to reach out to the community regarding something like that?
Well, you know, it's sort of the community can answer this, not just me, but in terms of tool set, yeah, you have groups, right? So,
yeah.
And by the way, not everybody has, just if you don't know what you end up doing, I'm just going to take Gene as an example. When you onboard, you provide your interests, right? So I have and I don't think the users have the total ability here, but I can see in industrials, right?
And I had gone to the industrials group, and
I know, but they're not. But not everybody who identified themselves as a so, and this will evolve, meaning that you'll have a more advanced search. But these are the people that have already self-identified as being interested in industrials. But more so, you know, as we grow, at least it's a little hodgepodgey, but, you know, take, you know, you can go to industrials here and see, I can clear, and then, and these people, of course, as I asked, I want to do that, it doesn't work, but I'll pull this way.
Mark, is there a chat? Is there a messaging function in the app that he could send that message out to the community?
Well, you can do a couple things. You can certainly post, including I like this functionality. But from the homepage, I'm just using, and unfortunately the iPad version, you'd have to turn your head right because the mobile looks a lot better from the iPhone. But you can post here. You can, that group is not, and not everybody has joined it, but you can definitely, and if like Simon, I can also do this. I can look at posts, for example. And so, Simon's I featured, right? So if you need anything, if you really want, just ask me, I'll feature it. All it does is it puts it to the top. But when in doubt, you can always go old school. This is a tool for us to know who's interested in industrials, just as you can see this group, again, Dennis and CIO just came out this call. They're in another family office in Dallas, which has $1 billion public book in energy. Jim, who runs the steel company. Catherine Hill Ritchie was with this industrial family office. Lauren, who worked for T. Boone Pickens, now he's passed, but they still have their platform. Rob, who does distress industrials. Ronald is doing energy in Guyana. Turner, many of you know, Chris Phillips is in Phillips Petroleum. Eric's with Turner. Will Sutherland, they just bought Coca-Cola. I guess I have him in industrials, but he could be in sports because they own the Raptors. Gersenich, big family out of Calgary in energy. Chris, one of the best oil guys I know. Clark, you guys know, who does metals. Greg Merle's developing a $2 billion project in Indiana. Harry Sargent, who does bitumen. Ian Cochrane, that's a Russian group that owns steel. And Leonard, and on and on. And Leonard Lubim, who's doing these projects in Africa. Marco's got this EV motorcycle. And Matt Friedman, who runs an automotive tier 1 supplier. Roya is SR Steel. So, they're all there. They're at your fingertips in the shared sheet, and it'll get better and better.
And hey, this is Akash Abraham. I'm in the steel and industrial segment, so if you need help, happy to throw my hat in too.
Well, again, let me look at where so it's just sort of a best practice. Akash, are you on the app?
I am not, but I will be. I'll sign up or download.
You're not. Yeah. So, just self-identify, join those groups. But hopefully what's going to happen 2-3 months from now, Torrent, they're going to be industrial. What happened with Future of Work, once you do a deep dive, it almost catalyzed. Let's just say, for example, I go to groups, and I'll just look up Future. So not everybody did it, but there are 29 people who joined. To me, I almost feel like, look how many are in the group itself, 11. I almost feel like changing this group, making it the Future of Work group, changing the title from an event, and doing the same thing. Once you do a deep dive on seed stage investing, that will bring out peers. And I think once we get these people to do more catalytic events, that's going to populate everything. I actually what I need help on, I need a committee to help protocols, some systems, but I now have people joining that I need them to, I'm asking them now, that it's called custom fields, that I want you to say your connections to the platform. I almost feel like I need my own custom field. Just tell me who you know. I don't want just people coming in out of nowhere. I actually noticed it's 11 o'clock. Let's take a few more minutes just to make sure we close out that question. Does that help answer that, Torrin?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's in the early stages. So we should decide how we want to do this. And what is an appropriate request? This is kind of an operational question. I don't want to, take up someone's time if it's not, something that's relevant, but I know the community has the resources to answer it. So, I don't know. Just establishing those protocols, and I'm not trying to solicit or anything, but maybe
By
there's
the
an
way-
investment opportunity there as well. So
By the way-
I'm just not sure what's the appropriate thing to post and what's not.
I think when in doubt, you're thoughtful. Just post.
Okay.
I'm worried about people we don't know posting. That's what I'm more worried about. And by the way, on Ohio, I know Joe Jerebeck is in. You guys need to talk about Dayton.
Yeah.
Separate thing. So look, a lot of people have just signed in wondering, what is this? Is this a weekly briefing or what is this? So we're going to transition. So thank you, everybody. We'll give you more of the playbook, and thanks for all those questions are the key to helping us grow here. Well, now that another 12 people have joined, what I wanted to just, today we're gonna talk about the future in different ways. Here's the agenda. I did want to, by way of just sort of a quick refresh update for some people, you just heard it. Groups and fusions, I'm calling it, and the next deep dive in the conferences. And then Stephen Burke from ARS, actually this is a little bit dated. He's going to talk about the market and AI demographics, and he's also going to talk about interest rates. I think he's going to talk about the rates that matter. He'll go into, I think it's interest, birth, and productivity. Is that right, Stephen? Maybe I'm mute.
Tech adoption.
Tech adoption, okay. And then we'll have a discussion, and at 11:30 we'll transition to this, which is the Future of Work event, and here being the itinerary or agenda. We'll have 3 keynotes and then 3 startups, focusing on real estate, really interesting one of it, immersive technology from Ilya, and then we'll have a sort of a moderated Q&A type panel, and then we'll go into breakouts and talk about a series of questions that Simon Vine will pose, and then a town hall debrief. But by tradition, if you don't know our tradition, we just sort of mix it up, get people together, and to meet others at the beginning of these briefings. So I'm going to put you all into into some rooms. Give me a moment. Where are we? Oh, I need to make myself over here the leader. 1 second. Now I'm the host. Yes, I have 2 devices here going. All right, here we go. We'll make it 3 minutes because everybody was complaining there's not enough time to meet others. Here we go. Hi. I'll move you guys into some rooms. We're just doing our 5-minute. Arslan, you there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Bill, we're just starting we're just doing these breakouts, but everybody's coming back in a second. Hi, Renee. We're just finishing up these little breakouts.
Okay, perfect. I can be here till 11:30. Should I drop off? I wasn't exactly sure what this.
I'll put you in a breakout.
Oh.
I'm the CEO of a company called Cadence Intelligent Technology, and we are an intelligent facility management company. So we use artificial intelligence for video streaming to be able to make things smart and do notifications when things are happening. Excellent. Who else is on? I'm Duncan Riefler. I am affiliated with Revere Merchant Banking. I've got some personal investments in some smaller venture situations and funds myself. And working on some projects, holdings that Revere has in the healthcare, cannabis.
Hi, Mark. As you see, my internet doesn't work half of the time, so I hope it doesn't happen when I need to talk to people. I will send you my kind of keynote speech, and if I get disconnected, you either can take it and continue, or you can say whatever you want, right?
Yep.
Sorry for this.
Yep.
Oh, here we are.
We're all back.
Duncan, I'll answer that question when we get another chance, because that's a really interesting story right now.
That was not 3 minutes.
So, Paul, I was actually, I think, close. Well, what was it then? What do you think it was?
34 seconds.
Mark, we weren't quite sure what to do. There were 4 people in the room, and we weren't quite sure what to do, or if we were waiting on something.
But this is just to meet each other. This is, and if you haven't been part of this, I know maybe I should have given a preface. This is where we just go around, and this is the tradition of, you know, who you are and what, you know, maybe not what you're looking for like we do in the 30-minute, 45-minute breakouts, the asks, just to meet some people.
Okay, all right. Because we didn't see social impact or any topic, so we didn't know exactly what we were discussing.
Hey, Mark, I got a suggestion, because I
Please.
think everybody would be interested. Why don't you give Jonah the floor for 5 minutes before anyone else, and let's hear what he thinks about Epic Gaming and Apple, because basically that economic model has everything to do with everything we do all day long.
Well,
Well, tell you what, we can do. We can do that now even, because it can be one of our spotlights. And he did provide some information on the app. Here I am.
I did, but Mark, you are a much better lawyer than me, so you may know on what grounds they officially sued. I do know it was like an antitrust act.
Mm-hmm.
I could probably speak more on the implications, more so on the legal battle itself directly. But
Yeah.
I mean, the implications of this are beyond just gaming. You want Epic Games to, listen, both Epic Games is a genius marketer. They are literally the best marketers in the world. They have positioned themselves to look like the Robin Hood of gaming. They're not. They are just as bad in many ways as Apple. But it's a matter of, like, if you had to pick which one you would want to win, it would still be Epic, because if they win, it doesn't just help gaming, it helps anything that ever exists on the iOS App Store ever. And there's a reason for that. And the reason that they call Google and Apple a duopoly, more so Apple, is because in order to build an app on Apple, you can only do it on the iOS App Store. There is no other platform like a Steam or a Google Store or anything. You can't do anything else on Apple but the iOS Store. And so what happens is Apple knows that you can only do it on there, and everyone's accepted that, so they make 30% fees on every transaction that exists, and not just any gaming app, but any app ever. Like if Mark Sainor has an Apple app right now, and he started charging for the platform.
And I don't have to pay Apple. We have Stripe built in on the inside, and when we
But you're not charging anyone for this app right now. I imagine once you start doing that, you'll be.
No, but once you come in and you want to access certain content, you can, you know, at some point we will, and you don't have to go through Apple to do that.
Well, you're
So
still,
Mark-
maybe you're using Stripe as like a payment processor. It may not mean that you're not like under Apple's rules, where somehow that then goes to Apple.
I take your point, and even
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting they threw that Apple ad from 1984 on.
Yeah,
and
that was awesome.
They put it on YouTube. They didn't mention that they're suing Google too.
They're suing Google, but Google doesn't matter as much because Google's actually they're monopolistic in search engine space, but in terms of app building space, they're actually very lenient and very reasonable, because what Google allows you to do, unlike iOS, is you have the Google Store, which no one uses really because it's kind of garbage, for lack of a better term. But they allow like Steam, they allow like all sorts of other app providing platforms on the Google Store that you could download and access through there. So there's a lot more competition. So Google's not as really important, because like Google's, like, if you want to know why Google's like removing them, it's just to like get attention. Like, hey, look, we're important too. Well, that's really the only reason. There's not any real reason beyond that. But if Epic wins, it would be a huge win for small businesses everywhere. Because if you think about it, when you build your own app, you're not like, you're not joining the ranks of Apple. You're building your own little company. Like for example, not that you're little in any way, but if you're building this app and you're fully independent, that's your own autonomy. If you have to bend to Apple's rules and Apple does win, that's going to be a big blow to small business.
Big Brother could remove us for
anything.
Mark, we're investors. The fund that I'm involved in, FoW Capital, we're investors in Epic. Yeah, Mark, it's Eli.
Okay, Eli, go ahead.
So the fund that we're invested in, FoW Capital, we're investors since the Series B round of Epic. And a little familiarity with the lawsuit is that we're basically going after Microsoft as well. It just wasn't announced yet. But pretty much they're stealing. So when you give the access to third-party data, they basically take that data and they sell that to marketers and advertisers, and they limit what you could do with that data. And it's we're getting a lot of issues with that with customers and kids especially, because they'll start upselling them on different stuff, and parents started getting annoyed. And that's sort of where this whole lawsuit was formed, based on that info. We're hoping that by settling, we're never going to go to court with this. So we're hoping to settle with them, just to get better transparency on where the data is being shared and how it's being shared.
Now that makes a lot more sense. Thank you, Eli, for that insight.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That's something, that you directly invested, a lot more than I do. Let me ask you again about Epic. Obviously, I mean, in my opinion, aside from Fortnite being your biggest asset, or Unreal Engine 5 really, what are you doing with the Epic Game Store, depending on how this case goes?
There's a few different ways of where they see this going, and we're not allowed to talk about that yet, just because of confidentiality. But
you guys can connect. Let's put that there, because we have to move on anyways. Obviously, it's a very intriguing subject. And this is where I had this meeting with the groups. We can have today, tomorrow, next day, we can have a deep dive on this, half-hour discussion on this. So I want to just have this happen organically. And you can have a one-on-one, or you can say, we're going to do it, and I'm going to give you guys a playbook of how we can support you if you want more people to join. I mean, I want people to join. But let me turn to the update itself, because we have the future of work in 15 minutes. And Stephen, you've put to the, and let's kudos to Stephen Berg. Every week, this is the 19th week, he has done this to help us think about where we are. COVID and was a catalyst of this. So, well, Stephen, do you want to take the slides, or do I having these as backup?
You'll use them as backup if I can.
Yep, I'll stop sharing.
Okay. Let's look here. Is that on the screen for you guys?
Yep.
Okay, go to slideshow here. So just before I get into this, just some math on Apple for those keeping score at home. When the iPad came out in 2011, Apple had a market cap of $110 billion. Today it's closing in on $2 trillion, which is more than the 30 stocks in the DAX and within 300 billion of the combined market cap of the consumer staples sector. And I think their services business overall generates about 50 billion a year. So the numbers are massive. There is a case to be made, and forget about the rate that they're charging of 30 or less, but there is a case that small businesses would never have gotten the access to the market without paying for the third-party distribution, which is really the way to look at that fee. But you guys have more answers on that than I do, but it's going to be a fascinating case with big implications. In a few minutes, Simon and a series of speakers will share insights on the future of work. And if the preview I heard last night is any indication, we're all in for a treat. And if we've learned anything this year, the future of work's coming a lot sooner than any of us had expected. And I'm going to take it from a different perspective than what you're going to hear later. I'm going to focus on the macro side of it. And when I think about the future of work, I think about it in terms of GDP. And in its simplest terms, it's a function of growth in population and productivity. So we'll get to why interest rates plays into this, but birth rates and tech adoption rates and interest rates are the three big factors in our view that will matter for the future of work. So I went back and, as Mark said, the benefit of this is every week I get a topic and I get to go and research. And I wanted to understand better how global birth rates have changed because it's half the equation for the population growth. And when you look at this chart of a comparison of 1950, where we're expected in 2050, what you can see is that virtually every region around the world is seeing their birth rates cut in half. Pretty significant changes there. And why is that? In the US, the 5 reasons that were given in the New York Times article 2 years ago were really around economics and time with the kids that you have. So financial stability, given where we've been the last couple of years, you can expect that birth rates will stay muted, if not drop even further because of the challenges economically that people are facing. Dependency ratio is an important factor for businesses and governments, and rising dependency ratios is not great for either party. And what dependency ratio really is, it's the math of the children under age 14 plus the people over age 65, and they're depending on the working group, which is ages 15 to 64. And if you go out to 2050, what you're going to see is in Europe, out of 100 people, 75 of them will be either under 14 years old or over 65. That puts a lot of strain on businesses. It puts a lot of strain on corporate pension plans, puts a lot of strain on government finances because the liabilities that governments carry are quite high. These are factors that business leaders are going to have to factor in, and certainly government leaders are going to have to factor in. But this gets to the population shift as well. And this is from the Pew Research. And you can see it a little differently. And we looked at right before the baby boom and where we're going to be 2045 to 2050. So the blue is 1950 to 1955. And look at the drop in birth rates from in the population growth, with Europe going negative and Asia really taking a hit as well. And then if you look at switching to how is work week and productivity play out, it goes to, you have to look at hours worked. And when you look at the hours worked from 1850 to 1950, you're looking at a very different society where people were working 60, 70 hours a week and starting to decline rapidly. And then you can look at it from how it looks around the world. And this is a recent study by the OECD, and it shows that when you look at the Netherlands, for example, 24-hour work week versus Mexico, almost 45, the US has maintained pretty steady at 38. My expectation is that work weeks are going to continue to decline as automation picks up, but you'll also see some challenges in a lot of different areas with this. And that, are we going to move to a 3 to 4 day work week is one of the questions, particularly as we've had people working at home. So switching to tech adoption, these are 3 quotes you've heard me say before, but it really gets to what we're seeing going on here. And I was talking to somebody in Silicon Valley yesterday who's a tech investor who's very involved in Canada with the technology area. And he was saying you'd be surprised how knowledgeable Justin Trudeau is in all things tech. Very impressive. And he made this quote a while ago, and I think it's actually quite true. CoLead was the CEO of Vodafone and is responsible for leading the task force in Italy on moving out of the pandemic and reopening. And the quotes are really all, we're condensing, because of the pandemic, into a very short period of time, technology transformations that would have taken longer. And the businesses that can adapt and adjust to this and accept it are going to be creating a big gap over those that can't. And we don't think everyone can compete in that area. So the next question that's asked about tech adoption is, it wipes out jobs. And I have a study that was done, and it looks at a bunch of different leading thought leaders in the area. And it ranges from Oxford looking at the job losses from automation will be over 40% of the labor force, to Forrester, McKinsey, and others down around 10%. What we've seen over time is it's more about tasks than it is about jobs. And it's the elimination of menial tasks that change the jobs. But if you take all the tasks away, you eventually lose the job. But I saw this, ironically, on Friday, there was a presentation by Hal Varian, who's the CEO or the chief economist at Google. And he showed this study that in 1950, there were 270 jobs, only one has been eliminated. But what people forget back then was the elevator operator was also the information center, the receptionist, security, and other things. When you fast forward to today, there's about 269 jobs listed in the US Census as detailed occupations. So the number of detailed occupations hasn't changed much in 70 years. But what is changing is the role of AI and other technologies and how they're going to augment people's jobs. And there is a disconnect. Everyone knows we have to go to incorporating technology into the daily routines of roles that are going. And as you can see from this study, a lot of people expect to do that globally and also within their organization. But when you look at the commitment to the retraining and reskilling that's going to be required, they're not putting their money where their mouths are. And what we think is going to happen is this divergence of opportunities between the businesses that are successful in this area and those that are not. So why do interest rates matter? And this is one of the big issues that I think people are in government and in business need to be aware of and take advantage of, because rates, the gift of low interest rates or negative interest rates is not going to be with us forever. And while it is, people have to use this money to take advantage and make the investments they need to make in the future to enable them to make the tech transition and get the adoption rates going so they can deal with an eventual labor force problem that we're going to see out there. Government's taking advantage of zero interest rates to add technology, whether it's fixing the grid system and improving our power transmissions and all that, will enable businesses to operate more efficiently. Businesses making investments in how they bring in artificial intelligence and blockchain technologies and other technologies in are going to be critical in reshaping the jobs. And at the same time, you have a smaller workforce in the future coming very, very quickly. You look at Japan, they're going to go from 127 million population down to about 106 million population in 20 to 30 years. You're going to need a lot of workers, and the workforce, because of the demographics, is shifting so that the actual workers are not going to be supported by or having to support too big a group later on. So we think these three things all come together. I'll give you some other rates that are going to matter depending on the outcome of the election in the US for US companies, and that's going to be the tax rate, the rate we reintroduce regulatory burdens. The Trump administration basically cut regulatory burdens from corporations by about the tune of $110 billion. That's money that's going to go back into expenses for the company that can't be used to invest in technology and other things. Higher taxes are going to put greater strain. And then also, if we raise the minimum wage, which should be raised, it's going to lower corporate profits, and that's going to actually push for more automation. So all these forces actually come together to create what is going to be a very interesting future of work. And I think Simon and team will take you the rest of the way. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Stephen. So questions to Stephen for any of these themes, questions to the group.
Hey, Stephen, I'll jump in here and break the ice. You know, China's pretty well known for advanced AI. Are there any lessons that have come out of there in terms of what we've seen with their priority on development of AI and the impact on how work is done there? And I know it's a much different situation because there's a lot of command economy priorities going on. But I was just curious if you had heard any observations from that.
No, I haven't. What I did hear, though, is that the countries with the two biggest population problems are the fastest adopters of robotics, which is Japan and South Korea. And I think that the robotics role of how you integrate robotics with your regular workers is going to be one of the big challenges. And you know, it really takes a very different way of thinking about your business to make the changes that we're going to all have to make. And it makes you wonder how young a leader you're going to need when you hear Jonah and others talking about the way they're incorporating and think about technology is it's such a part of their life. And yet some of us older horses, it's a lot bigger difference to bigger change in lifestyle. So you're going to have different kind of leaders or different ways that leaders interact. And you're going to have, I think, a much bigger mix of older and younger leadership in companies partnering together to give the wisdom of the old with the tech savvy of the new. So I don't think anyone solved this one. I would say the big issue that I think is going to be a real problem that we don't talk about as much here, because we all know it's a problem, is cyber when you get all this stuff going on as well. So, and that's another element.
Which is another deep dive we need to have. Joe, we were going to do a few spotlights, but we got a little bit of time. Do you want to do a segue to MJ before we switch over to future work?
By the way, Mark, I can help with the deep dive on cyber because I'm doing it.
Yeah, I know you are. Okay.
Yeah, I was kind of curious to just poll a few people and kind of see how the future of work is impacting different industries. And I know MJ's working in mental health, so that was one area I was kind of curious on how, you know, that his view there. And I would kind of pose a couple others, but MJ, why don't you kind of kick us off?
You got to
unmute
yourself though.
Better?
Yeah.
We have a platform for the sober community and those people who are also trying to get sober in an active addiction. And one of the things that we were discussing actually with LinkedIn, because LinkedIn's focus is really to try to get the people who are kind of like the non-white collar and bring them back and give them, you know, better chances than what exists right now. With regards to people in active addiction, we need to show them that there is some hope on the other side once they get clean. And so what we're trying to do is have companies like LinkedIn latch on to some of their Fortune 50 and Fortune 100 companies, large retailers, large brands, to try to say, hey, listen, if you get clean, we have a job waiting for you. Because the only way to incentivize people within active addiction to get better is for them to think that there's some upward mobility that you know, outside of working a minimum, you know, job working at McDonald's. So I think that this is incredibly important because this is a missing population that we need to really include, because there's tremendous talent. And it's not bad people trying to get better, but sick people trying to get well. So that's a discussion we've been having.
MJ, can you stick around we're going to have breakouts in this future of work. You can.
Yeah. Yes, Mark, many people send me a message they cannot get through to the link. What do I answer them?
Do they have the password?
You send them the link.
Yeah, I send them a link, but they registered through the site and through.
Mark, if you've got a password on this one,
we do.
You've already started, and there's a different password, they won't be able to get.
No, it's the same password. We kept it seamless. I think, Caitlin, are you on? Well, just send me those names if you could, or have someone, and we'll. Let me just kick this off, Simon, and then I'll take care of it as
as you get going. All right. So this is in many ways, Simon Vine is like a poster child of how I'd like everyone to be engaged. Actually, let me go to one slide just as a notice point, is if everybody here could mute themselves. As you can see here, we are recording this. You stay on mute, and if you could, there's no pitching. This is all about discussion and definitely not politics, even though we're in the middle of two conventions going on here. But as a poster child, Simon Vine had this idea of this conference, and I'm hoping that other groups, and we have many groups, as you can see, and on the app, which can fuse and do things together. Future of Work is a great theme for that purpose. We now also, through our alumni and otherwise, we can also come together. Those are powerful ways of having shared experiences. Again, my background, for those who don't know, is I'm first to go to college, so that my alumni really helped me as I got launched. And but then I was on the buy side family offices, and I did parallel alumni networking and brought that to the family office community. That's what we have now. But before we did Zooms, we were going around the world, met a lot of people, so we could collaborate to do things in different asset classes and industries. We saw this working. It's a lot more efficient than my family office hiring an army to create a private equity shop. So we also do things with funds. But again, these alumni events, the schools really don't serve their alumni very well. They're milking the cow instead of feeding it. So I'm sort of bucking that trend. And again, we can come together through these alumni networks to do different things and share it with shared interests. So we're on both LinkedIn. We're coming in to Cadence of global conferences. There's a 2-day agenda here in September 16th, 17th. We let all these groups have their own breakouts. So if you were in agriculture, for example, you can click on this and it takes you to a slide deck where you can take ownership of your breakouts. But we are here today to talk about the future of work. Again, thank you to Simon Vine for spearheading this. And Simon, I've known through a chain of trust. I'm not sure if it came through Rich Sobel. You have to remind me, Simon, how it happened. But of course, he was head of investment banking at Alpha Bank in Russia, where I spent 8 years / 8 winters in the 96 to 04 period. And he has come back home, so to speak, and is an investor in different things. He's joined our platform, and I'm very excited that you've put this together, Simon. So I'm going to let you, I'll still move the slides for you, but take it away.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you, everyone, and welcome to our webcast on the future of work. We're very grateful that you found time for us while you are on the beach, in the spa, or any other types of remote work setting. I want to reassure you that all anti-COVID precautions are taken, and I disinfected my microphone before talking to you. The future of work is a conceptual framework, and that helps, the framework that helps to prepare people for common technological disruptions and other consequences of the fourth industrial revolution. One moment, please. I'd like to share a simple message. They came, they're here. I'm talking about the changes. Over the past 8 years, we heard from all sides how the world will change. And now COVID squeezed the timing of the transitions and then synchronized them. As a result, what we're supposed to see over 10 years happened in 3 months and happened in many industries at once. We see effects of these changes on people, on those who lost their jobs, on the real estate that was considered a safe haven investment, on shared transportation that stalled because people stay at home. Hundreds of industries are in the process of this accelerated change orchestrated by nature. The whole picture reminds me of a reality show where we observe things that no one imagined that one other than on the movie screens. For many of these changes are a call to action, but up until now, there was no holistic framework to think about the effect of these changes. It emerged recently. Its name is Future of Work. Today, we will talk about some dimensions of this new theme to help you visualize the new emerging interdependencies which have been weaved by the fourth industrial revolution to become the fabric of the future. The interdependencies that will help you to make better investment decisions. Before we continue, I would like to invite you to share your observations and questions via chat. And now, allow me to introduce our guides into the future, Gary, Denise, and Elliot. Gary is like a Zeus in the field of future work, and his lightning road will make the landscape of discipline clear. Denise, like Mother Teresa, will explain how the future of life is possible amid future of work. And then will come Elliot, the 9-feet giant who keeps future of work at Facebook on his non-fragile shoulders. And he will go over the practical issues that the discipline needs to answer. Gary, time to speak. Put on the mask. The sanitized floor is yours.
Great, thanks. So it's great to meet you all, and looking forward to giving a really brief overview of some of the sort of macro trends related to the future of work. So I've never been compared to Zeus before, so I'm going to have to go polish some of my thunderbolts to really take on the mantle. But I just wanted to give you some really quick overview of some of the macro changes that have occurred in the realm of work, and then set up Denise and Elliot for some of the things that they're going to dive into. So Simon, do I have control over the slides, or is that something that I'm going to need to ask to have them flipped?
I have them, Gary, but you can maybe I'll just flip as you ask me to flip.
Okay, great. So back in March, I wrote an article for Techonomy.com where that I called The Great Reset. And so up until early this year, we thought that the biggest shift in the future of work was, as Steve was mentioning, were issues related to technology adoption. And the biggest concern was that robots and software were going to take a whole bunch of jobs. And obviously what we found is that along came a virus. And so I called this the Great Reset and said seems to be likely we're going to have 3 phases, an initial sort of falling off the cliff phase, a sort of riffling along the bottom phase, and then hopefully there would be another phase in the future that we can build towards where we can build better. But right now we're in this sort of second phase where we're all trying to turn the lights back on. We know that there's going to be a constantly changing set of rules. We know that the lights are going to flicker and suddenly go off in different areas as we have to lock down again. And we know that there's going to be economic activity in certain areas and not in others. And so we're likely still within a year to see some pretty substantial impacts on unemployment, on the kinds of industries that are thriving and those that are not. And this is the new normal. This is, there's a range of different things that we thought were going to be happening and we're predicting were going to be happening in the transition around work, and actually a number of them happened. Not everything that we've been thinking, of course, because the dynamics that we've all been adapting to have been a lot different than what we predicted. But so next one, please, Mark. So let me just give you sort of 5 ways that work is changing, and see these as sort of the drivers of the ways in which work is going to sort of reassemble itself. So we use this word unbundling, which comes from my friend John Hagel at Deloitte's Center for the Edge. But the basic way to be thinking about these different aspects of work, what work is, jobs, careers, teams, and then organizations, are all different sort of facets of the diamond about the way that humans channel their energy together. So next one, please. So the first way to think about this is we've tended to sort of structure work around the idea of a job description. And as Stephen was saying, there's a lot of jobs that we track in the United States, and other countries do the same thing. What's actually happened, my father was an author, and he said a job title is actually a poetic metaphor. It actually doesn't really describe what the work is. And job descriptions have not really described what work is for quite some time. Next one, please. So what work really is very, very simple. It's a set of problems to be solved, and it doesn't matter whether it's a dirty floor or a complex market entry strategy. And it's our human skills applied to those problems. Now, there's something in between, and that's tasks. And as Stephen was saying, really what happens with automation is that tasks get automated. As I'm fond of saying, robots and software don't take jobs, humans give them away. Robots and software automate tasks, and it's a human's decision whether or not a job disappears. But this is what we encourage people who are thinking about how to transition their organizations to the future, to become very, very problem and skill centric. And I know that Anita's going to be talking about skills especially and how we can sort of crack the code on that. But the basic premise is that this is really fundamentally what work is. And we need to shift the way that we approach structuring work so that we have much more of an idea of the kinds of problems that need to be solved. And that's how we'll help our organizations to be able to solve the problems of the future. Next one, please, Mark. So, and the reason to do this is because each of us as human beings, every single human being on the planet has a human potential. And the most effective economies and society are those that have a commitment to trying to help people to maximize their potential, to be able to move up the economic ladder and to be able to contribute to their economies and societies in the most effective ways. And every economy and society has different design heuristics for how it does this. And organizations have different approaches for how they're trying to continually match human skills to the problems that need to be solved. But this, and I think Denise is going to drill down on this, this is really what I believe is one of the fundamental values and goals of the organization. Now, next one, please. So if that's what work is, what's a job? Well, it just so happens that my father was a recovering minister here in San Francisco who ended up writing a book called What Color Is Your Parachute, which became the world's career manual. And he broke a job down into 7 different aspects. The skills and the information that we use to be able to perform our work, but also the people that we work with, how we're compensated, and so on, and especially purpose, sort of center the target. Well, what's happened in so many of the startups that are literally blocks from me here in San Francisco, next please, Mark, is they are actually unbundling all of those different aspects of a job. There are all sorts of innovators that are saying, wait a minute, this is a market opportunity. If we're going to have people that are going to work more distributed, if we're going to have teams that are going to be collaborating from remote, if we're going to have information that people are going to be gathering just in time and just in context, as opposed to the sort of traditional 4-year degree, each of those is a market opportunity. And so as we've seen with each of these different innovators, from Udacity and Coursera on knowledge gathering platforms to remote work and distributed work platforms like Upwork, there's a tremendous amount of market opportunity that's being unlocked, billions of dollars worth of market opportunity. And if we can just see how those red threads are developing, we'll be able to see where the opportunity is. Next one, please. But if we'd been able to anticipate a virus, we would have seen that actually there was going to be a huge impact on the people that we work with, the workplace itself, and then geographically how we coordinate with each other. And I know that Elliot's going to be drilling down on some of the best practices for these. Next one, please. So insight number 3, if we've talked about work, we've talked about a job. Now, what about a career? Well, after my father wrote this book, What Color Is Your Parachute, he wrote a book called 3 Boxes of Life. And he said, I think actually our lives from the industrial era have sort of been crafted into these 3 boxes. big chunk of education, then a big chunk of work, and then a big chunk of leisure in what I call the period formerly known as retirement. And this actually was the arc of our lives for decades. Many of us went through this. We made a massive investment in education early on, and then we amortized that investment over a lifetime of work. And then we got the gold watch and a little bit of chance to relax at the end. Well, next one, please. What's happening when a young person comes out of college, high school, vocational school is, sure, they're getting a day job, but they're still studying online. And then suddenly they take a gap month with their friends, and then they get a new job, and they're driving for Uber at night, and they're working on a startup with their friends. Next one, please. Well, I call this a portfolio of work. In the same way that each of you as investors, advisors, you talk about managing risk. Increasingly, what young people are doing nowadays is they're managing risk by having a distributed work portfolio. A safe investment, that's their day job. A little more risk, make a little more money, that's Uber. And then high risk, that's the startup with their friends. Well, this is a rational response to an exponentially changing world. And so increasingly, organizations are going to have to understand how they will help these workers to be able to do their work effectively. And increasingly, a lot of that work is going to be more and more distributed, which is going to have massive ripple effects in where workers are, where they live, how companies organize all that different work. Next one, please. Well, if we're going to talk about being distributed, well, then that's obviously that sort of where the rubber meets the road is at a team. And in the past, we sort of defined teams around managers. And we used to think that we couldn't work from remote. We did what I call management by surveillance, which means you had to see who was working for you. Next one, please. But what has happened in this era is that we have now realized that actually a team is basically just a group of problem solvers. They're just there's a pool of people with different skill sets in the same way, with a Marvel movie, each of them, there's a door to be broken down. Well, that's the Hulk. Well, this is what's going to happen increasingly with teams, is they're going to be these groups of dynamic problem solvers binding around problems. Next one, please. So if that's what a team is, what about an organization? Well, the organization itself actually was a construct that was built from the industrial era. And it was sort of a box. There's abundance outside the box and there's scarcity inside the box. How do we manage scarcity? We have a hierarchy. Next, please. But what's happened is, in that increasingly portfolio of work world, we're finding that there's all sorts of different work contexts, from contractors to open learners, there's consortia, there's online work platforms, there's crowdsourcing, there's all sorts of different ways that people can channel their energies to solve problems for the organization. And so that box, that mentality that there's sort of a binary approach, either somebody's an employee or they're not, has just evaporated. Next, please. And so what we've got is what we think of as a fluid organization. And you have to think of this as a construct that has soft walls. That is that it's very, very difficult now to determine where the edge of the organization is when you've got all these different kinds of workers that are helping to solve problems for the organization. And so this is increasingly the model that you're going to see organizations adopting. And it's actually already the model that many tech companies adopt. More than 50% of the people that work for Google are actually subcontractors. Next, please. So you can knit all these together and say, work is becoming unbundled and just basically being distilled down to skills and problems. Jobs are basically becoming unbundled and becoming far more distributed. Careers, especially the shift from education to work, which I know that Ronita is going to be talking about. The process of building a portfolio of work is absolutely the mentality that we're seeing more and more workers have. Teams have to become much more dynamic groups of problem solvers, and the organization itself is going to have to become much more fluid in the way that it thinks about all the human energies that are solving problems for it. And then ultimately, this is all going to happen against the backdrop of maximizing human potential. So those are my fire starters. If you like any of these ideas, next, please, you can find out more. I've got 9 courses on LinkedIn Learning with about 250,000 students, and you can sign up for my newsletter or see a lot of the links to the things I've talked about on gbowles.com. So now I'm going to pass the torch, the fire starter torch, to Denise and let her take it from here.
Well, I also have never been compared to Mother Teresa, but I will take it. And I have a few that might argue against that. Hi guys, my name is Denise Bruder and I'm the founder at Sway Workplace. I am a future of work enthusiast and practitioner. At Sway, we simply help people master flexible working as a future of work initiative. So I've got 5 minutes to tell you the 5 things that I think you need to know today about the future of work. Simon had previously been mumbling something in Russian about what happens if you go over your 5 minutes. So I'm going to keep my part short and sweet for that purpose. Number 1, the future of work is a journey, not a destination. And what I mean by that is that work is a global language that we all speak. And this is a language that has very simply been evolving since time began. From being nomadic to developing agriculture to the technology and digital revolutions, these are all milestones in times where we have very successfully reimagined and redesigned work to create new sources of economic value. So as we stand on the precipice of the 4th Industrial Revolution, we're up at bat again in a game that we've been played well for a very long time. The second thing I want you to know is that work is a system. So the worker, the work being done, and the workplace are the 3 parts of the formula of work, and that's how we create value. Work is governed by 4 primary stakeholder groups: academia that teaches, government that sets policy, companies that work, companies that hire, and the workers that do the work. So the system itself by nature holds over time. What changes from one milestone to the next is the dynamics of the relationships between each part. The opportunity that we have here in the future of work is to seek out those hardware, software, and service solutions that mitigate the risk and promote value creation in response to the unbundling of work that Gary referred to in his presentation. Number 3 is to understand the foundational nature of the future of work. So the future of work is an emerging ecosystem and industry all upon itself. Most industries that we think of are typically vertical in nature. So you could have healthcare, telecom, and real estate. What's interesting about the future of work is that it's horizontal in nature, and it runs right across the base of every vertical industry. It has such broad relevance because it's concerned with how we optimize where, how, and why people work in a way that creates sustainable sources of new economic value. Number 4 is human potential. Human potential is the difference between what you were born to do and what you actually are doing. As technology continues to automate tasks, we have a growing opportunity to maximize that source of potential. Companies seek this to drive new revenue streams. And on the other side, workers are seeking this to find purpose in what it is that they do. Now we get there by reimagining human intelligence, which again is a place, not something that you earn or pick up off a shelf. It's found at the intersection of physical, emotional, spiritual, and intellectual intelligence. The opportunity here is to seek out solutions and services that carve the path to that destination. For point 5, why now? There is most definitely enough artificial intelligence in the market today to automate a significant percentage of the tasks, but only a fraction of it is commonly used. The very wide delta between availability and deployment is low user adoption because people simply resist change. However, the COVID experience has forced everyone, even those that went kicking and screaming, into this digital world. And we are all now operating from a newly developed digital mindset. And the impact is that this will inevitably accelerate AI adoption rates. So the question is, what can you do with this? There are 2 things you can do. Stay in tune with conversations like this. You don't have to be an expert or a futurist, but you do need to be around the intelligence of building these norms and business practices that are defining the slave of the journey. The second point to think about is to use it as a filter for decision making. So future of work criteria is an expansion to a checklist and consider it as a folder in a data room, an additional dimension for when you are evaluating business opportunities. To wrap my part, Gary outlined the future of work framework. I hope I've given you some perspective for how to interpret that framework. We're going to pass on now next to our buddy Elliot, who is boots on the ground in the involvement of the future of work in the corporate setting and the challenges that he has. So over to you, Elliot.
Thanks, Denise. Mark, can I take over sharing the screen?
Yes, you may.
Thanks. All right, cool. Can everybody see? Great. So hi, I'm Elliot. Thanks so much, Denise. So I'm currently at Facebook, where I head up Facebook's distributed work efforts. This is a new initiative. We just started this a few months ago to solve all the problems that we're talking about today. And for context, in the past, I've solved problems like this before. I was a 2-time startup founder and CEO. Both companies had remote workforces spread out across California and New York and Massachusetts and Ohio and Australia. While Gary and Denise have spoken about future of work as this broad, horizontally reaching force, I'm going to talk about one tiny part of that. And that's the part that we're all experiencing so acutely right now. And that's remote work. Now, I don't have all the answers. This is pretty new for a lot of us. But what I'm going to share is which problems I believe need our immediate attention. First, let's all get on the same page. So remote work basically happened for all of us overnight. There were some people who were doing this before, but a majority of us, one day COVID happened, and the next day, all the leaders in our companies, or us as the leaders, said, everybody, this is going to be hard. It's a sprint. We're going to get through this together. So when all this started, there was about 100 billion video call minutes happening per month on Zoom, which sounds like a lot. I use that one dot there, that blue dot, to represent how many. Now, over the course of a few months that followed, obviously we all changed our tunes. We realized we're in this for the long haul. We started saying things like marathon. So everyone, here's your energy. This is a little longer than we thought. Getting a little feedback if someone's not on mute. If you could go on mute. Thanks. So said it's going to be a marathon. Everyone hunkered in, and then, oh shit, 3 trillion video call minutes on Zoom 3 months later. That's 30 times more video calling minutes that we were spending, which is insane. Now, with this, everybody started doing it. Everyone started doing the video calls themselves. Everyone that was stuck in remote work, a bunch of companies came out. Twitter said that no one's going back to the office. Facebook announced that 50% is going to stay remote. Siemens, Schroders, PwC, the list goes on and on. We could spend this entire session listing all the companies that are now saying that remote work is here to stay. Meanwhile, we're exhausted. Companies are dropping productivity. We are going through road mapping cycles and things like that that require creative attention, and companies don't know how to approach this. We've set a goal, saying that remote work is this goal, confusing it with a strategy. Are we doing it right? What I'd say is probably not. So some of you might have seen that this morning, Amazon announced plans that they're going to expand their offices in 6 major US cities, create a lot of new jobs. They intend to bring people back to the office. Facebook has also announced additional office plans. I think one of the best case studies, though, to look at is look a few years back, and this is in 2013, when Marissa Mayer took over Yahoo. She called everybody back home. Yahoo had a significant amount of its workforce remote, and she said, enough's enough. This isn't productive for us, and come back. We're going to talk more about why that is. So I guess all of this is to say, is this a fad? Or is remote work here to stay? Now, I believe that there's a real opportunity here, but that many people are going to miss the boat. There are fake trends in remote work that need to be ignored. There are goals that companies are setting that are passing as strategy, but really they're nothing more than fluff. I don't think that I have the answers, but I believe there's a few areas that we need to focus on, set concrete strategies if we and our company are going to be successful adopting remote work. Is everyone else getting that echo too? Hearing myself like 30 seconds after I said it. So we're going to talk about 3 things: time management, idea generation, and diversity. Companies that look past surface level problems and focus here are the companies that I believe are going to see the greatest long-term benefit and competitive advantages from adopting remote work. So first, let's talk about time. Time, I think, boils down to 2 things: meeting management and what I'll call documentation and communication. How can we get off being on Zoom all day? This is not an efficient use of our time. And what we're seeing is a lot of people whose jobs used to be primarily spent in meetings are just taking what they used to do back in January and trying to map it one-to-one to this remote world. And it's probably not a good use of company resources. Companies that can think through how we can systematically reduce the number of meetings and the number of participants in those meetings are probably going to have the best success adopting remote work. Now, a lot of that has to do with documentation and communication. One of the things that we're lacking now is the ability to just walk up to a colleague and tap them on the shoulder and ask, hey, what do you think about this? Or why are we doing this way? Those casual interactions are gone. And when we haven't documented things, it means that now we're bothering people all day. We're setting those meetings to dive into the details, or worse, we're pinging each other on tools like Slack 24/7. There are no boundaries anymore. And if it wasn't always on enough already back in 2019, it sure as hell is a little too always on now that we're here in 2020. This bleeds over into ideas. Now, historically, ideas have come from people colliding in offices. At least that's my opinion. I think Silicon Valley is probably the shining example of this, where it wasn't just people in offices, but so many people stuck in a peninsula together where they had no choice but to be talking about work, talking about their interests, coming up with ideas, coming up with companies, because they were all in such a small space and there was so much room for serendipitous moments. And those serendipitous moments are what power ideas at a lot of our companies as well. Those moments are gone now. Now we have structured meetings, and that ability to just chat with someone and have ideas flow, running into each other for coffee or in the cafeteria or whatever, are gone. So how can we bring casual interactions and serendipity back into our day-to-day life now that we're gone remote? Now, there are a lot of startups in this space, but all seem to be taking the problem very literally, the same way that we've taken Zoom and moved all of our meetings over. They're building sort of video games where you can hang out at a virtual water cooler, and maybe that works for some companies, but you're probably going to get just as much fatigue and burnout there as well. So how can we allow for ideas to be generated in a way similar to what happened before, but in a scalable way now that we've adopted remote work? And then lastly, I want to talk about diversity. Now, when I say diversity here, I'm not referring to it in the cover of the book sense. I'm more talking about what's inside the book. So diversity is by all means important, and a lot of companies have goals around hiring specific underrepresented minorities and things like that. But one of the biggest opportunities I see for remote work is cognitive diversity, truly getting people from a wider variety of backgrounds, places that we weren't prior able to recruit from, opinions and opportunities that we just never would have seen before. Because even now at our big companies, or small companies for that matter, when we're recruiting people that we see as diverse, they typically come from a similar background to us, similar schools to us, and it's not true diversity. So how can we leverage remote work to tap into people that never would have been on our radar, and we wouldn't have been on theirs? I think there's a huge opportunity to leverage diversity in this way. So from my vantage point, these are the three most important problems to be addressed. It's time, it's ideas, it's diversity. This might be a fad for some, but it's a real opportunity for those that are going to approach it and approach these problems head on instead of beating around the bush and focusing on the things that are still up on, like video calling. Now, one thing I think it's also important to call out is that whether or not you want remote work to be a part of your long-term plans, mainstream estimates are pegging us stuck like this until July 2021. So that is a lot of time that we're going to be stuck doing this, whether you like it or not. So unless you want this to be a lost year of productivity, you're going to need to start addressing these problems, at least in the short term, to stop the bleeding. If you can address it in a long-term way and make it into a competitive advantage for your company, then that's a whole different ballgame. And more to come on all of that in our panel discussion. So with that, thank you, and I'll pass it back over to Simon.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. As I mentioned, please post all your questions and your comments on our chat, and we will use your questions for our panel discussion. And now, without further ado, we will start our startup session. And Ronit, please start.
So Simon, thank you very much. And also Elliot, previous speaker. I very much enjoyed your session there. I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about our work in London. But before I go on, a little more introduction about myself. My background is a serial entrepreneur, serial financier, such a thing exists, where I sat on both sides of the fence, both financing and building tech companies for the last some 24 years, about 28 companies in the breakout technology space to date. My current focus is around the so-called distributed ledger technologies or blockchain technologies and artificial intelligence. And more intrinsically, it's where digital assets where those technologies meet the real world, where you have real assets, and ultimately what these technologies can bring to bear. Now, taking the future work environment and some of our distributed aspects of looking at life at the moment, we see very much that where we're trending to now is a different way of looking at the properties in which we reside in which we work in, which has obviously had quite a few fundamental shocks going on in the commercial property space. And part of the technologies we're bringing out here, we think are fundamental to where life is going. So looking at where we are on the current slide, the economy is rapidly changing. Coronavirus, we all know, has had a huge impact on us. But even before that happened, last summer, we had Mark Carney, the governor of the Bank of England, saying technology has the potential to disrupt the network externalities that prevent the incumbent global reserve currency from being displaced. In longer term, we need to change the game. So the world is moving. And hopefully with the work that we're doing here at the TPX property exchanges, we're going to be moving with it. Slide. So we have government debt increasing to eye-watering sums. US national debt, 26 trillion and growing. UK national debt, not quite catching up to those dizzying heights, but 3.5 trillion. We see the de facto deployment of modern monetary theory, or if you're a Ray Dalio fan, monetary policy 3, where you have massive government stimulus entering the marketplace and ultimately managing our jobs going forward. We have inflation as a next result of that. If you have too much money chasing too few goods, the inevitable effect is inflation. It's coming. You can take a view to what degree. We certainly think it's coming in a fairly large way. And therefore, how do you manage your wealth? How do you preserve your wealth? How do you make sure, both from a government point of view and monetary policy, how do you manage that on the macro level? And then how do we all manage it on a micro level? Slide. So we already see some of this happening right now in the marketplace. All of you probably are familiar with Robinhood, eToro, E-Trade. They're fractionalizing equities, and they're making it arguably affordable to a population, millennials, X generation, who perhaps aren't that familiar with equity trading or always wanted to be in equity trading when they grow up but don't have enough money. They're now actually starting to trade, and they're shifting the market, some 46% at the moment. Tesla's benefiting, Hertz is benefiting, where they're probably exceeding some of their fundamentals when they do. But that's the nature of what's happening now. So fractional ownership is here to stay. And what we're doing is we're moving that into the world of physical property. But not just property through REITs. If I can have this slide, please. Not just property through REITs, which is a traditional model. Sorry, one of the slides has fallen off there, images. But also in the fundamental title itself. So property is traditionally considered inflation resistant. It's an asset. It has a utility value. Some feel it has a greater value beyond gold in terms of its ability to preserve value and indeed as a utility to increase in value over time. Whereas gold is a very good store of wealth, property has utility value which increases over time. But why can't property also be a store of wealth? Why can't property be a store of wealth for all of us? Why don't we remove the ante up in terms of the threshold by which people can enter the game and make sure that more people can participate, which has a very good economic effect in terms of the gaps of wealth that we currently see in our society. So if you look at the value of property worldwide, it's actually about 260 trillion, give or take, dollars at the moment. The value of property, residential property traded in London is about 68 billion. So there's some good numbers there. So what have we done? Well, as you can see on this current slide, we're offering the public the opportunity to IPO their property on a public regulated exchange, where they're trading shares of title, not a share of REIT, not a share of company, but of the title itself. Original search and survey is done by our exchanges through our fractionalization service. That's registered, that's put onto a registry. The registry is acknowledged by our land registry. It's also in the process of being acknowledged by the Bank of England. And this provides some unique tools for them in terms of their QE and stimulus use. And the exchanges are designed both for macro and for micro use. We actually see the Bank of England or the Treasury having an account on our exchange in due course and buying property certificates that exist on people's mobile phones. Next slide. So, routes to market. Each title certificate is available for individual sale. Once you IPO your property, you put it into pieces, so to speak. They're actually represented in terms of its physical dimensions. They get converted into what we call property certificates, and those property certificates trade on your telephone. They also trade on institutional screens. So whether you're an institution looking to get into this game of trading the new asset, you could argue, because it has different ways of operating, or whether you're an individual looking to save your wealth from, as in the Chinese market, from their monthly devaluations that they're currently undergoing. And obviously Chinese are very keen on maintaining their wealth. So we designed the systems to enable this. As you can see here on the link on this slide, Go Mine Properties allows people to see a bit more, but we're effectively reinventing property for more common usage. And that includes both for banks and for individuals and all of us on this call. Now I think Ilya is going to be following me. Very happy to participate in sessions later. Feel free to contact me if you have any direct questions. Ilya, over to you.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. I would like to share my screen. I cannot share my screen while other participants are sharing.
I've shared, so you have the control.
Okay, perfect. Well, welcome everybody to my presentation. We're going to talk today about virtual reality and remote workforce management. And what Elliot said was super valuable and super relevant to what we're going to talk about. I assume you can see my screen. I'm inviting you right now to my virtual place. This is the PALM virtual continuum office. And you can see me right here on the screen, right in front of you, presenting live. So basically I am in this room. I am also, of course, on Zoom, and I am also on a different channels. And I would like to share with you my presentation using this technology. So I click on Command Share, and I'll put little slides, which will be very brief, and I will talk about pretty much obvious topics. So here we are. You'll see me, you'll see my presentation, and the topic is the future of virtual events, exhibition, workplaces, and classrooms. So common thing, how do we touch each other? How do we stay in links with each other? And we'll start from basics, right? We are visual beings. We humans process 60,000 times faster images than text. And we like see each other, we like to talk to each other, and we need ad hoc communications in the same spaces. And we are best at 3D processing. We have wonderful 3D processing machines. So obviously, you know about memory palaces. And what we see and what we kind of touch deeply affect what we do and who we are. And our next slide would be here. And I'll talk about the, obviously also common things that, sorry, one second. The traditional real-time interfaces provide the very intuitive and natural experiences to us. And when we try to replicate digital experiences, we sort of trying to replicate what we do in real life. It's not the right thing to do. We need to extend it. We need to basically build reality, virtual reality, which is better than our real reality. And so in 2015, this group called Roofle started this journey into what they called immersive virtual experience platform. And they want to converge actually four different technologies. One is spatial web, then multimedia streaming, visual audio chats, and conferences and digital collaboration. So what you see in front of you is pretty much a result of this work. As you can see, we're going to be talking, and I'm going to show you a couple cool things. We're inside this environment. Next thing is, so we've created this platform and put together, sorry, I'm constantly zooming in, and put together the pure browser technology, which allows to do multiple users to chat and have what's called ad hoc chats. So you can basically create conferences on demand. You can tap somebody's shoulder and say, hey, you know what? Let's not go to Zoom. Let's not go to anywhere. Let's talk right here. And we created intelligent avatars and created the whole studio to build applications. So that was like a platform. And next step was that the partnership with EPAM, the group created 3 solutions. One is for technical exhibitions, what's called exhibition platform. Second is the workforce management kind of a place. And third is virtual classrooms and the learning pieces. And what I'd like to do next is just walk you through this environments and tell you more about what we see here. For example, my PowerPoint presentation encapsulated right here in this dynamic sort of spinning spirals, and I just thought that key ideas would be better represented on demand. And if I want to talk about just particular thing, I click on I command, and it will bring me to the virtual chat right inside this particular booth. Next thing is, let's look at this guy. This is the also a sort of buddy, right? We obviously see avatars, but this is programmable kind of thing. If I want to supply my own responses, and I'm going to tell, hey, you know what? I actually like what you said. So we will be saying it like this. And if I want to laugh, or if I want to say no, it's also available right in this context. More than that, we also have some kind of insecurities, and sometimes we're afraid to represent ourselves, who we are. So we can use this type of visual kind of buddies to talk. Now, employees in the room represented themselves in this flying sort of flags, and they could be also sort of speaking and talking, and obviously different type of media is available on demand. And with that, I'll go to the next room. I'll show you the virtual classroom right here. Just give me 1 second. I need to go back and shut down. I need to go back and shut down my own presentation. So this is the virtual classroom where students have assignments, and each assignment as well could be linked to conference, linked to multimedia, linked to any kind of gaming aspects of the game. And by the way, the platform is written on competitor of Epic, is called Unity. Basically, it's completely agnostic with respect to gaming technology. But the idea is that we're going to bring our children. I know in Massachusetts, they're debating closing public schools and creating virtual environments. I definitely feel like this is the place for kids to study. And this is the place for them to study in front, better than in front of Zoom. Hopefully next event, our event may be taking in this platform. One more thing. This is right event as we speak. This is the Montgomery County conducted some real event and brought different vendors. This is just a real exhibition with real stuff. If I go into this booth and I start looking into this video, we will see that Lockheed Martin puts together the recording about their own aircraft. Guess what? We have the same thing right here. We can go back to booth and flip around. Let's say I'm going to use this navigation rotational thing, and you can see the airplane on the background. Just give me 1 second. I'm a little bit clumsy. Here we are. This is the basically aircraft. I mean, not aircraft, it's basically airplane, as you can see it. And again, people communicate through it, engineers collaborate through it, they can get in, get out, and talk about it. And so basically, we are in a world of different visualization, different animation, different collaboration tokens and patterns. This is flying televisions. The last thing I'd like to show you is basically shows us the room of different video channels. Each of them is active representation of whatever video people can put on demand. With that, I would like to finish saying that hopefully you got the idea of what we're planning to do in terms of bringing together different collaboration medias and creating hopefully better workplace for us for the future. That's it for now. Thank you. I thought I was prompt on time.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Ranit, please.
Anita?
Anita.
Hi.
Sir.
Hi.
Can you hear
Hello,
me
Anita.
okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to be here. This is my first time here. As was mentioned, my name is Anita Balaraman. I bring the vantage point of being a scientist, a technology product manager, and an educator. So let's start with the notion. So that's the perspective I'm going to bring to our conversation today. So let's start with the notion of how a career has changed. Maybe you can go to the next slide, please. How the notion of career has evolved. We no longer see a career as a professional life as one-time education leading to lifelong employment. Even in our lifetime, that's kind of changed. Traditional career paths have changed. The kind of roles that we see have changed. Think about computational genomics as a major. Think about the role of an influencer product marketer that did not exist 10 years back. That's the scenario we are in. And the pandemic and whatever is only accelerating this, right? So people are now needing to find and have multiple learnings and multiple careers, and that is already here, and it's only going to accelerate. And that causes chaos and inequity, the way I see it, from the perspective as an educator. And so let's take, for instance, the students who go to college today. They have fields and specializations that have been created that are more confusing to them than before. They do not have the perspective of looking to the parents or their community to understand what that major may translate into and what kind of roles that may have. So the confusion is real. And what the future of work looks like is something that students are grappling with in a really hard way. Let's just put it that way. Unfortunately, this is the time when things such as career counseling is becoming more and more important. But let me tell you what the statistic for career counseling or having that access looks like. Today, there are about 1.2 million students who go to a K-12 school where there is a law enforcement officer, but there is no school counselor. And in a public school, the student to a counselor ratio is almost 500:1, 500 students for one counselor. And in higher education and colleges, it's 1800:1. That's the ratio you're talking about. And so it's no surprise that students don't look to the career center. In fact, only 20% of them go to the career center to get career advice. And we see this trend play out real time in our universities. The next slide, please. 80% of them, and that's a real number, 80% of them try to change their majors as they get in, trying to match and respond to the shifting labor market. And with this explosion of traditional, non-traditional learning models, new majors, and the lack of a counselor, and even the relevance of a counselor, because as I mentioned, these majors are really new, did not exist 10 years back, and you have job types that did not exist maybe 10 years ago. The confusion and the avenues that they are able to tap into is felt. And in fact, it's felt even more so by the underrepresented students, women and minority students, who are not even aware of what kind of majors exist, what kind of career paths may exist that started 10 years ago, but they are not aware of. So it's only exacerbated more for the students of color and diversity. The next slide. So at this point, I guess as we were looking at to evaluate the future of work, we need to look at it a little more holistically. About 3 pillars that are going to be critical. I think I changed the order, so maybe you can go to the next slide. 3 pillars and how these are going to be critical as students learn to navigate the career and learning. The first pillar, and this is in no particular order, I'm just going to start from left to right, is skills. What a student identifies as their skills. Remember, I said identify as their skills. And then what they choose to develop, and then what they choose to highlight to a labor market are connected. And that has a lot of bearing on their social capital as well, where they grew up, the communities that they grew up, what they saw as being a part of them and their peers influences it. So, and then the third part of this is occupational identity. So as a student that comes in, they're able to understand that, okay, I have an interest in math and chemistry, but I honestly don't know what that leads to. They look to the parents and their community to evaluate what that translates into and what kind of majors that may translate into and what kind of career paths, and they're pretty much lost. So they look to their near peers, the upperclassmen, who are actually a lot more valuable, and we've seen that goes back to what I quoted earlier. 20% of the students only use a career center, and that is for the last mile to apply for a job. They don't go there for counseling because of the disparity in the counselors to student ratio that I mentioned. So this scaling the social capital the students have access to. Students want to meet other students. They could be upperclassmen, recent alumni with a similar kind of a skills profile. What do you mean by skills? What I'm talking about skills over here is a slightly more holistic way of looking at skills. And connecting with near-peer role models who share those skills seem to be a lot more valuable for them to be able to drive and using it as an evidence-based method. Oh, here is somebody that, like me, did Model UN, that was interested in debate, and they did this major, and now they work here. That is evidence-based for them. And that's how they are mapping in this nebulous world that's changing, how they are mapping their professional, academic, and career path. So the third pillar of this is the occupational identity. And the occupational identity is focusing on the competency development, competency overall that spans across different domains, right? And they get that through hands-on learning experiences. So the idea of the three pillars of unlocking the career potential, which puts them, is kind of key to how we think about the future of work from the perspective of students and how they get into the workplace. And as I mentioned before, today what I see is the inequity seems to be getting wider because of the current situation. Whether it is scaling of the social capital that they have or identifying their skills that they're born with and what they can achieve. Oops, sorry, the previous one still.
And we're running over time. Sorry,
Oh, okay. So at the end of the day, I just wanted to say the designing for the future includes scaling and distribution of the social capital, identifying of the skills, using the best practices in AI and NLP, mentoring best practices, alumni relations, and program directors. And it's using evidence-based solutions rather than just mere personality tests, and creating incentives to move away from the last mile mindset. And that's about it. Those are the three pillars that we are trying to solve over here. And I just wanted to say that's the perspective of what we are seeing from the future of work. Thank you.
Let me just make a comment. You should meet Eric Lindbergh, who runs the Knowlton Foundation, which provides grants to colleges for career development. So there's a connection to be had.
Thank you,
Simon. I guess we're gonna kick off a bit of a panel Q&A. We have two people I've asked them to think of what the speakers were saying and then ask a few questions. That being Tom Jump and Karsten Wortman. Do you want to? Who wants to go first?
I'll jump in, Mark. This is Tom. First of all, it's really, really great. Love the perspective. I'm going to steal some of your thinking shamelessly. But kind of a couple questions for the three of you is, look, I'm doing a lot of work with, startups as well as old established companies. And I'm curious to hear your perspective on how this transition of remote and distributed work is going to impact leadership. Obviously, leadership has to evolve in terms of how they communicate, how they connect. How do they listen now to what's going on? And ultimately, how do they inspire, accelerated change across the distributed workforce? So that's one. I mean, how is this going to impact, leadership? The second is culture. Most people think you build a culture by kind of being together, right? In four walls over the course of time. And it's built upon a set of kind of cultural values that, the management team kind of shapes and tries to socialize. But I'm a big believer that culture kind of helps create an enduring, successful company. How do you build a culture, when you have an incredibly distributed workforce and roles are changing at such a rapid pace? So those would be my two questions.
Who wants to take that from the speaker?
I don't mind diving in first. So, and thanks, Thomas. Those are both great questions, and I think consistently top of mind, especially for leadership and organizations. So first, from leadership, what I say is, so you've always had a range of tools in the toolkit, and one of the most common that I think goes back to literally to sort of in search of excellence in the 70s was management by walking around, and that was the mentality that you could basically just continually interact with your people and have a lot of one-on-one and one-to-many conversations, but you basically could keep a finger on the pulse. So that actually, obviously, that's been significantly fractured. But the truth is, many larger organizations already were highly distributed, had many different locations, and had processes in place for being, or at least trying to get their arms around that sort of more distributed communication. So now a leader has to use MBZA, management by zooming around, and they've got to be much more intentional. So in the past, if you could leave a lot of this interaction to chance, you could have the random water cooler kind of connections that Elliot was talking about. Now you have to be far more intentional. And this is true of teams. This is true of work groups. It's true of leaders. You've got to be far more intentional about trying to create the context in which you can gather that information, in which you can respond to them. And I'll just give you one example. When you have a Zoom call like this, why not have the chat stream be the stream of consciousness of all the people that are contributing to it? And something that you can't do in real life is to see the thought bubbles over people's heads. But why not tell people in a meeting to be able to continually post their thoughts, I mean, their authentic thoughts about what we're talking about in the chat stream, so that you can actually be, far more intentional about getting information out. But I'd say leadership has to change in a couple ways. First off, sort of 3 strong pillars for a leader in this period. Leaders have to be far more good at their work, so they've got to be more competent. They've got to be more compassionate, because there's no question that you have to understand the lived experience of your workers more deeply as they're more isolated. And the third is that you also have to be far more communicative. That is, you've got to be far more out there in terms of the ways that you're connecting with your people. When it comes to culture, culture is simply the aggregate behavior of all the people in an organization. And hopefully that's anchored in a shared values. So again, back to intentionality, is organizations have to be far more explicit about the behaviors that they want to reward. They've got to be more consistent in the ways that they agree on what those important behaviors are. And they've got to be far more communicative about what is necessary to be able to solve the problems of the organization when it's more distributed and when you don't have these kind of random interactions. And if you thought culture could be sort of left to chance in the past, just look at Pinterest. Look at what the CEO of Pinterest is going through right now, when he left culture to chance and suddenly is having his own Me Too moment. And so this is the world that we live in now, especially as leaders of organizations, we have to understand that culture is actually something that is co-created. It's a team sport. It's something that we build together by reinstantiating the shared values of the organization, and then by talking about the kinds of behaviors that are encouraged and discouraged. And so that's really what is critical in this period, is to have far more intentional leadership and far more intentional energy around culture.
And if I may, I would just add that, as Anita said, a very important component here is social capital. It was a theoretical concept before, and now when we don't see each other, people who have the social capital will be able to do things, and those who don't, people and team. And those who don't know how to operate this will not be able to do this. Social capital, just look out, it's a very interesting term.
So Karsten, do you want to weigh in with a comment question?
Yes, absolutely. So first of all, thank you very much for this great presentations. I think it gave us all, great insights. Since we're running a little bit out of time, I'll keep it very brief. I'm actually coming from the talent acquisition side and talent development side. And my question would be, which kind of jobs will be needed in the future? Which kind of jobs will we be in? And on the other hand, which kind of jobs will fall apart? And that also reflected on the discussion which is going on in the chat at the moment. Will it lead to an inequality, in our society?
We've lost him.
I don't want to monopolize the conversation here. I don't know, Elliot or Denise, do you have any thoughts to weigh in on? Or
Yeah, I'll jump in real quick, Karsten. I think that the redefinition or the new narrative is not about a job, but it is truly more about skills and what goes away, what stays. So a good example is, if you look at healthcare, you could have a nurse and he or she has, on any given day, there are 10 tasks that they're going to work on. It's very likely in a short amount of time that 3 of those tasks are going to be automated away. And it could be a bot that comes in and organizes and automates how they assign rooms and nurses to each room. And what a relief that would be for that nurse not to deal with the monotony of that low-level tasks. So now 30% of their time has been freed up to dedicate to the care that they can give at the bedside to improve the overall patient experience, which leads to the bottom line of the hospital and the business model. So it's not so much that jobs are going to be automated or disrupted, but they're definitely going to change in nature. And that is something that we all need to be prepared for. And in terms of inequality, with skills and education being democratized at such a rate, given these large online open platforms and thought processes around skills to access, I would argue that it's not a source of inequality, but actually one of equality, particularly as we distribute the workforce and we're working and location is no longer a barrier and skills are easy to access. I would argue that over the medium to longer term is an opportunity to promote equality in the workplace.
So just to piggyback on that, so what the data is pretty clear on is a couple of things. First off, if I could show you the screen, I'd basically show you sort of a magic quadrant diagram, which is in the lower left, what Denise was talking about, the repetitive tasks and tasks that don't require a lot of analytic thinking or a lot of creative thinking are the ones that are going to get automated. And then the upper right is unique tasks, creative problem solving, that sort of thing. And so we know that this lower left corner is where it's the domain of robots and software. And so the opportunity is to help people to move to the upper right. Well, there's 2 dynamics to that. First off, as I was saying in the chat line, it's the pace and spread of change. And so if you've got a growth mentality and you see yourself as constantly changing and growing, and you can develop that new skill set and you can become more and more of a creative problem solver, then everything goes great. And that I don't think is necessarily mapped to education, but it certainly is mapped to opportunity, in that a lot of the opportunity in the upper right is simply not available to people that have lesser educations or grew up in places where there's simply not a diversity of opportunity. And so that's the first dynamic, is that we've not created an education system, nor have we created a work system that actually benefits a lot of workers in moving up to the upper right. The second is that if you look at the range of different kinds of jobs, the lowest paid are the ones almost with almost only one exception, and that's construction work. From the lowest to the highest, the lowest paid jobs cannot be done remotely or in a distributed fashion, and the highest paid jobs can be. Construction work is about here. It can't be done remotely, but it's pretty well paid. And so the challenge is that right now we have an economy that's highly biased towards that separation. And so the base of the pyramid is typically this work that's being done by frontline workers. They're the ones that are most at risk. And so in an ideal world, what happens is exactly what Denise is talking about, is you get freed up from all these mundane tasks down here in the lower left, and you get to move to the upper right. But as I said, robots and software don't take jobs. Humans give them away. And so if you automate a whole bunch of tasks, a human who's had 100% freed up in terms of tasks, we call unemployed. And so the question is, will we create a work system as opposed to an unemployment system? Right now we have an unemployment system in the same way we don't have a healthcare system. We have a sick care system. So the system only kicks in when something bad happens, that is, somebody's sick, or the unemployment system only kicks in when somebody's unemployed.
Gary, sorry to cut you off. I'm just trying to keep it.
Oh, that's okay. Great.
This clearly, I think Elliot's point yesterday, it was made too late. We should have just extended the time. The question whether it's actually a poll to the group, if we should have 90 minutes or 2 hours, or what's too much. To your point, Elliot, we're just zooming away here. But this is great. We are recording this, so I'm wanted to move on to the 360 part of this, which is the roundtables, where we interact, we talk about these questions with each other, and then we come back in a what we call a town hall debrief. So just, we're gonna click a button. We're gonna go into random breakouts. 10 about 100 of us here, so we'll go into 10 breakouts. Maybe we'll do 12. But you take a first part of it is introductions. It's about your asks, who you are, meet the group, and help each other. That's really the nature of our ecosystem. And then discuss these questions, these 4 questions at the bottom. You can choose one, you can choose all 4, and have one moderator from your group be ready to prepare to, to give a 30, 60 second, takeaways from what your group thought about. And then I see Ronit has joined us. She's also going to talk about the future of work in emerging markets as we kick off that part of our session. So if you haven't done this before with me, it's one of my favorite things I like to do is to do these breakouts. So I'm going to recreate into, we'll do 11. And I'm going to push a button. You'll go randomly and just try to follow this guidance. And appoint somebody. If you haven't done these before, don't let anyone dominate the conversation. That's part of our principles. Just allow everyone to have their input, and someone be a good, moderator chosen by the group. Here we go. See you back here, and we'll make it about 12, 15 minutes. Bye. So Dimitri, Mike, Joanne, you want to join a particular? I'm going to move you to a group. 1 second.
Yeah, hi, Dimitri. I'm actually going to take a little break because I need to make a couple of more calls and then reconnect.
No worries. Okay.
I'll stay on though.
Okay, great. Mike, do you want to join a group? Yvonne, hi. I'm going to let you, I'm going to move you into a room. Richard, I'll move you to a room too.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. It was pretty quiet where I was. No one was really speaking. Not sure why.
What room was that?
Appreciate it. I think it was number 9.
Okay, interesting. Okay.
I hope you well. Thanks for a great session as always.
Strange. Okay. I'll move.
I will say, so I've been looking for jobs for
Hi, Mark. Can you move me when you get a chance?
Richard, did you not get to the right place?
I didn't move yet. If you can move me, that'd be great. Thanks so much.
Okay. Hi, Bob. I'll take you to your son if that's okay. Or do you not want to go there?
Hey, how are you? I
Good.
lost you there. I had some tech issues.
Okay, well, let me join this one.
And even kind of a practical application, my older son just took a new job that doesn't require him to be in the office. It's completely remote. And he's only been there for he works in software development, and he's only been there for 8 weeks. And he's finding that one of the things that he misses the most is kind of the proverbial water cooler stuff.
Exactly.
The social interaction, the camaraderie of, kind of small teams working together on projects together, things like that. I think there's some human dynamics that, again, this paradigm is sort of waving their hands over. And, as always, I think things will be a blend of where we are now and where people think we ought to be going forward. But
Ilya, do you have a water cooler in your virtual rooms?
Yes, I do actually. We call them sofas. Call them they basically chat sofas, because we feel like water cooler is you have to still stand, but in the sofas you sit and you basically do nothing. It's exactly what I hope to accomplish. It's basically what I'm missing today is this unstructured, spontaneous interactions.
So 3 more minutes. Sorry, just let you guys 3 more minutes. We're gonna go back and debrief.
You know, it's interesting.
Capitalization today versus what it was 6 months ago gives us some indication of that. And so things like telepresence, things like and dramatically impacting the way that people do business travel, for example, is extremely significant. That are trends that are accelerated by COVID, and then there are other trends, negative trends accelerated by COVID, like brick and mortar retail, for example. I mean, brick and mortar retail is decimated by what happened, almost like an apocalyptic response to what's happened in COVID, which was happening anyway, but it's just been accelerated. Similarly,
Just letting you know, 2 minutes. We're gonna get back together. Who's your moderator?
I think
MJ. Okay, cool. See you soon.
dramatically changing, and
I don't know how to express specific. Hi, Mark.
Hi there. How are you?
Daniel's been participating a lot.
Hi, Daniel. Are you?
Hey, Mark. How are you?
Good. Good to see you. You're Moscow
And you?
still?
I am.
Is Brinkley and Gregory on?
One of the disadvantages is my daughter's telling me it's time for dinner, which fortunately I cooked.
Nice.
Yes, I'm on.
I've had both my kids come in during this. Hi, Brinkley.
Hello.
So we're gonna 1 minute. We're gonna get back together at debrief. Just saying hi.
Instead of thinking as issues as problems, to think about what your goals, dreams, and aspirations are, and then what are the challenges that thwart us getting there, and how do we address those obstacles. So it's having more of an appreciative inquiry focus rather than a deficit problem-based focus.
Great. Maybe I will also add a few words. Somehow we don't know each other. Gary and I don't know each other for a long time, but we're kind of, in many ways, maybe a little bit. I'm trying to add a little bit to what he says from my perspective, and it comes naturally.
Hold your thoughts, Simon. Just give me 60 seconds. We're gonna go back to the debrief. All right.
Mark, I think you need to put in a 5-minute warning and then a 1-minute warning that you're going to transition back to the main room.
All right, so noted.
The worst part is that now I look much fatter than before the room.
Some of us already got moved out, but unfortunately I need to leave for something else. So thank you very much. It was great.
Esther, thank you for coming.
Yes,
Well, we're going to go around the rooms, and but before we do, Ronnie would like to give you the floor to. I think I've got your presentation. Just tell us about future of work in emerging markets, and then we'll go around to the others. Let me find your slides.
And you know what, Mark, if you give me, if I can share my screen, it'll be,
yeah,
I'll be able to just do that. Yeah.
Okay, go.
Okay, fantastic. So first of all, thanks everybody. Nice to meet you. And my name's Ronit Avni, and I run a talent tech company that connects university students and recent graduates in emerging markets to industry experts to guide them and employers to hire them. And I want to talk about the future of work as it relates to students, that continuum from education to employment, particularly in emerging markets. I want to start off by saying that a lot of the time when we talk about a technology that's going to come and overrun an industry, there's often a lag. There can be a 20-year lag between when the tech is available and when the adoption happens en masse. And sometimes it's a 30 or 40-year lag depending upon the geography. So people, for example, were calling short films supplanting long-form film 20 years ago. People were calling the end of universities for the last 20 years as the Coursera's and the Udacities came into existence. And we see that that's actually not the case. And it's especially not the case in growth markets. So I want to share some data points that I think will be interesting, just so we have a little bit of a check on the that balance between tech and social dynamics okay, so can you all see my screen? Okay, so when we're talking about work, one of the essential things that we have to think about is the recruitment of workers, right? So it's a $500 billion annual global industry, but right now only about 6% of that is being spent in emerging markets, even though they make up 85% of the world's population. So we know that that number is going to grow. So number one, the recruitment in these markets, we're talking about China, India, Middle East, Latin America, et cetera, that number is going to dramatically increase, even if it only doubles to 12%. I'm not saying it's going to be the majority, but it's not going to stay at 6%. It actually grew 65% in the last 2 years before coronavirus hit. A couple of other notes, there are 100 million students that are enrolling in higher education in these growth markets annually. And so that's over 5 times the US market as a point of comparison. These individuals are not saying, you know what, we don't need university. We're just going to do our upskilling and our digital skills. They're saying that we do need university. And in fact, in most markets, universities remain a proxy for quality, especially if you're dealing with recruitment across markets where people aren't necessarily understanding the legitimacy of the credentials of a particular individual. So having a highly reputable university degree carries a kind of a weight as that proxy for credentials. So we have quite a ways to go before we see that trend diminish. And there are about at least 55,000 colleges and universities in these markets. At one point, China was adding a college per week. So just to kind of give you a sense of the scale and the growth, that's in stark contrast to the United States, where enrollment has been going down. Millennials are, they've graduated, Gen Z is smaller, and they're really suffering. So if we talk about the US market, very different. But when we talk about emerging markets, enrollment and activity in higher education is actually going up. Now, you may have already discussed this. Forgive me, I wasn't here for the first hour. The World Economic Forum projects that 65% of young people are going to work in jobs that haven't been invented yet, right? And so no university or no platform can possibly prepare them for roles that don't yet exist. But from my perspective, and something that we're seeing, there are 4 things that are helpful for them to become future-proof, right? The hard skills, which I'm sure you talked about, the soft skills that I'm sure you've talked about, social capital, which I believe was mentioned, is critical, right? So having access to people working at the vanguards of these sectors, AI, robotics, renewables, et cetera, is critical so that for young people who don't even know what job to apply for or what titles are available, if they're talking to people who are working in those sectors, they have access to that information. And so then the question of asymmetric social capital and networks really comes into the fore. So for example, if you're a student at Stanford, you have 40 full-time employees in career services alone just to connect you to the alumni network so that you can learn about all of the roles that you could tap into. If you're at a university in an emerging market, maybe there's a dean of students or maybe there's somebody in career services. Huge, huge gap in terms of those. So that means people aren't informed about what the possibilities are. So having access to that, you need access to those experts, but you also need access to employers that are going to hire you. Now, one thing that happened during coronavirus is that the primary way that early stage recruitment takes place in emerging markets, and I'll wrap in just a second.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, the primary way to recruit in emerging markets is actually in-person career fairs. And so if you think about those 55,000 institutions, most of them suddenly stopped interacting with employers when coronavirus hit. So you have a whole generation that just graduated in this last class, 2019, that has never interacted with industry. They have no points of contact to industry. So just being aware that how this is playing out in different markets, the faster that you can get into virtual points of connectivity, the faster you can be competitive. So the prediction I'm making is that this, and universities globally are recognizing this, the idea that there's going to have to be that connection between industry and higher education in emerging markets, that's going to have to be both in person and digital. It sounds obvious, but when you think about those lags, it's really important to think about the pipelines that may be missing currently in many of these markets. So I'll just stop there. Happy to keep in touch with folks if you're interested in digging in, and thank you for hanging on at this hour. Mark,
Mark, I had a quick emerging markets question. Is that okay?
Because it's you, yes.
Thanks. Thanks, Rona. This is Rob Coloring. I've lived in some of the emerging markets, and we've got some principal investments there. Was there any notable GDP spend or in the emerging markets versus either developed or, let's say, developed, emerged international markets that you could communicate here? Thank you.
You know, great question. I haven't looked at the GDP spend. I'm looking at investments that are, so in a market like India, the ed tech investments are quadrupling right now as an example. So you're seeing huge uptick of investment in this space in virtual markets. Happy to dig in. I have access to that data, so happy to dig in further. Mark, you're on mute.
Thank you. This is my backup because I've done Zooms and I've lost power and all the rest. So yeah, but let's go around the rooms. Just give some quick takeaways. Who was in your room? I think MJ, you're the moderator for yours. It's unmute.
Sure. Yep.
Go for it.
The quick takeaways with regards to future of work. One thing that we discussed at the end is something that was discussed within an earlier discussion that you had, was how we don't have connection anymore, people ideating around the water cooler, as the gentleman talked about in Silicon Valley. So we're now suffering from fatigue. You know, we're on Zoom, 15 hours a day. How are we able to get that connection and engagement back, and that fun and that ideation that happens when we're live and in person? And so that's kind of a big challenge that I've seen across the board. At the end of the day, nobody in my company wants to speak to me because I've been on Zoom for, from 5:30 in the morning until 9 at night. So how do we get that back so that way we can get creativity back into the workplace?
Fair enough. Good points. Just raise your hands, whoever wants to speak next. Anthony, I knew you were going to be the moderator for your group.
Well, I tried to shut up. Well, very quickly,
I'm going to come in quick. So we had some good points come out, looking at what's happening in the offices, emptying out, et cetera, difference between London and other cities. But a couple of things really interesting came up. One is interns. If you have an apprentice type program and your interns are there, but there's no one to work or sit beside to teach you what a bond is or what a financial instrument of one form or another, how does that passage of information happen on a Zoom call? How can you get that iterative process? And so what happens with the interns? So a very good question there. On the hire side, indeed, how do you hire people if they're no longer coming in for interviews, if you're just doing it on Zoom? There's a lot of signaling as such, Zahavian signaling or whatever that you pick up when you're talking to people. And that doesn't necessarily come across on a Zoom call. So there's aspects to that. Final points in the future of work. It's rather interesting that some of the success stories seems to be when the workplace discipline is imposed on the remote worker. So if you have a Zoom call at 11, people will prepare for the 11 o'clock call. But if your remote work is unstructured and the workplace isn't structuring the remote work at the home or wherever they're remotely working, then some of the productivity could be lost. So on the people that we had in our session, generally it's quite balanced, is actually people felt they were more considered and more productive, but less structured. But the external structure is still important. And the final point was social etiquette. Social etiquette on calls. Be careful what you put in those chat channels. That's it.
Fair enough. Thank you. Good points.
Marcus, it's Tom. Tom, I'll go for our group.
Go for it.
Yeah, a couple things that the group felt that may have been missed. One was the level of specificity for the physical environment. We had one individual who works, it's got people working in labs. I mean, looking for kind of a framework for how to kind of configure and kind of re-engineer the physical workspace. Missing. Another thing we talked about was, I think the speakers talked about the importance of intentionality. I think we all agree that's really critically important. But we talked about there's also, as a leader in an organization, there's a level of precision, clarity, and thoughtfulness that is so much more challenging in a distributed workforce than it is when you're dealing with people, face to face. Because you can't read people's body language as well to understand whether or not it's registering. So you have to be very clear about, what you're communicating to people and what you want their behaviors and outcomes to be, right? So that was some of the upside of the remote force is, more equity of thought. You can't have a bully come in and dominate the group. It's hard to do that in a
you
Zoom
can. We've seen that. They're just not invited back.
Or you don't invite them to the Zoom call. But it's a little more challenging in a Zoom call than it is in a Monday morning meeting where you're going in through a lot of bluster. Secondly, look, we got a lot of smart people, and hopefully companies we work with, it forces you to kind of rethink and re-engineer kind of the creative mindset. I mean, you just got to find new ways to bring the same level of creativity and innovation to the organization and to the group. We talked a little bit about, do we see a world where there will be almost, an unbalance of remote work versus in the physical space? I think the agreement was there are a lot of people who want to go back to the office. Young people where it becomes a critical part of their social life. And then I think those people that really want to collaborate face to face. And then they're kind of growth driven organizations like Facebook who need to have, engineers and other people together in physical workspace. They're buying up and leasing new space all over. So I don't think anybody felt that this was, we're going to swing the pendulum to, it's a world of remote distributed workplace. And then there was one that we were just kind of digging into, and I'll let Duncan, you had a perspective that we were just digging into at the very end. Why don't you share that with the group?
Well, it was more a question than anything else, but the future of work and then all these discussions of the inequity we have, I just pose a question. If everybody had the exact same opportunity, are we going to end up with everybody having equal outcomes? My opinion is probably not. I think we are still going to have a bell curve of levels of performance. And I feel like the future of work and some of the things we're dealing with are going to probably change which skill sets are a little more valuable. The bully becomes less valuable, for instance. But we're still going to end up having this problem of people that aren't performing as well. And I feel like that's been lacking from this conversation in general. You know, not just today's conversation here, but the broader national conversation. Maybe people will take issue with what I've just said, but I guess, and I'm not trying to start a controversy.
Yes, you are. But so what are we lacking again? Just be specific. I want to make sure I get it.
Right now we have inequality. We all know there's inequality, right?
Right.
We have some groups claiming more inequality than others. You know, depending on who you listen to, who knows where the reality is on that. But there's some pretty good guidance that we could all agree on. I'm thinking if everybody had the exact same work experience and the exact same opportunity in life, we're still going to have inequality because of levels.
But what are we lacking? I heard that, but what do you think we're lacking in the conversation?
A discussion about that point. That's never going to go away.
Well, I think Russia and communism explained that pretty well, but I'm not going to. I'm already breaking my own rule. I'm not going to go into politics here.
Can I just tell you a little bit about communism? I just had this exactly. Duncan raised the question on which I almost failed an exam back in the Soviet Union, because the question was, would people have this equal opportunities under communism? And I said yes, because we all believed in this communism paradise. And the professor told me no, because different people will have completely different needs. And in different parts of the world, needs will be completely different, and they will have to have completely different skills. And suddenly I have this discussion 30 years later.
Well, let's go to the next group. Who's up?
Should I go? Do I go?
Go for it.
Cool. So, I mean, we talked about a number of things. One was healthcare, but in my opinion, what we're talking about here, and of course I tie it back to what I do in gaming. We've been doing that for many years before this was even a conversation. But I'll skip that, and I'll point to what the Denison grad, I apologize, Matt Garrix, correct? Did I say it correct?
I think that's right.
Yeah, he posed a great question, which I've had a number of times directed at me, and I have the same answer every time. And Matt said, as someone who's looking for a job, I just got out of school. You know, obviously he's a very, from what I hear, talented basketball player, played 4 years, captain. He clearly demonstrates some leadership skills. In a virtual world, how do I express that I am this person, right? Because the mannerisms that he's going to show off in the physical world will not translate in the virtual world. Like, I can't see him shoot a three-pointer. Like that doesn't work for me. And what I explained to him in a separate communication, and this is my opinion, so if you guys have different opinions, you can, is you may know the soft skill in a real world, but the soft skills in the real world do not necessarily apply in the virtual world, and unless you use virtual techniques. So what does that mean? We've done this in media a number of times. We do it in media every day. Learn Photoshop, learn Final Cut Pro, learn hard skills that exist in the virtual world that you can apply to your soft skill. For example, if Matt wants to show off how he's such a great basketball player or a leader in his new job, then he's got to be making YouTube videos, or he's got to be making podcasts. He's got to be doing something that shows that he can demonstrate those skills in a virtual environment, because, you know, they're not the same thing. You have to learn this whole new way of working. So that's what we talk about.
Great point.
I mean, it's actually rather relevant to have 15-year-old, 11-year-old, and a 4-year-old, because their world is now our world.
Right.
Sure. Next up.
Jim, do you want to do our group? Please.
I thought you were taking. I'm sorry.
All right. You can correct me. We talked about a couple things about what the big takeaways were. And one of the things for us pretty consistently was the lack of friendships and the shift in relationships that we all grew up with by being in the office. What happens when you're not in the office, and how does that play out? The inequality issue is one that also came up in our discussions as to, are we moving towards a more unequal world when you're in a virtual setting or not? And the challenge around social capital came up. I was actually going to add, when we went back into the group, that I think one of the things that I took away from today, and Tom, thanks for the great questions, is have we really developed the trust we think we have as organizational leaders? And when you go remote, you find out, based on the work productivity that you get out of your team, how they transition from being with you and being without, and how they operate. So I think we're going to find out the organizations that are kidding themselves about the trust they've built with their associates, and versus the ones that actually have built an organization that's sustainable, whether you're together or not.
Totally agree.
Sounds good. I mean, you had to deal with that recently, Stephen. When you brought in new people, you couldn't do that remotely.
Yeah, I hired 3 people in the last month, and I'm training them both remote, and we took a day and went into our conference room and social distance to do part of their training to get that interaction. So it's going to be it's a very different world.
Next up. We're all just calling people. Any other points of view?
Sarah, please share your view.
Simon, you go right ahead. You're doing well. You're on a roll.
I think the next time we should all come prepared with a joke as an icebreaker to see who's the funniest of the group. But in the spirit of that, doing things like this water cooler thing, obviously there's only so much time in a day, but trying to create some sort of socialization. I mean, that's happening now where we're all meeting each other on Zoom, but trying to do stuff that breaks the ice a little bit and allows for a warmer environment.
We had a virtual happy hour, but this didn't take off. Again, people just, in a way, I thought people would like a lighthearted thing, but people just were too busy.
But I think
the thing about that, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say that I think if everybody's doing too many Zoom meetings, and it is summertime, so maybe in the fall, in the winter, if it's cold and we're still kind of isolated, people will be more available for meetings.
Sure.
But I think it's also the art. What?
So I was looking for who was saying that too. Okay, sorry.
Sorry. And the last thing is, I think it's going to be the art of making it very interactive. So I'm working on a conversation now. So it's not like this, you have to wait for everyone to finish speaking. It's too polite. If you're at a dinner table, you would be able to, or cocktails, you'd be able to share conversation and have a side conversation and keep things moving. So I think there's a challenge there. And I think one of those things I'm going to do for my meeting is, like, because it's going to be like 15, maybe 20 people, the topic is going to be interesting, and then set up these meetings on the side so people could try to jump off and do their side conversation. But anyway,
we do that a lot here.
Yeah.
But we've set up a room for people, but that's a good point. It's something we're lacking systematically, to be able to have that organic sidebar.
The organic side, but somebody else talked to me today about maybe just allowing everyone and informing they could have side chats, to encourage them. So everybody posts their contact and their information, what they're looking for, what they do, what they're looking for, and then they could have those conversations.
Well, that's what our app is. Just so you know, that you can express your asks, you can post. That's the idea, is that sort of like these 24/7. You have inside a trusted ecosystem, not necessarily beyond. And then it's sort of like LinkedIn just doesn't do events, but it gives you the sort of base information. We're trying to achieve what you're.
Well, you are. Well, actually, a lot of the ideas probably came from you. Somebody else had probably come up with it. So, yeah. So what
and what you've done, you've invited me to this WhatsApp. I mean, it does go I mean, there's so many posts on that thing, but it's just another way to do it.
Well, yeah, there's a little bit of side activity there, but that one is not the best example. I have other ones that are much better, but anyway.
Well, invite me to those then.
Okay, well, and we're going to do that right away. And one's on equestrians and equestrian.
Invite me too. I want to come.
Yeah, okay, we will. And the
Well,
other,
Good.
This one last thing I want to say, because I know I'm taking up too much time. On the work environment, I'm a little concerned that we're going to have like virtual, like we're going to have body cams or like the cameras where everybody keeps on talking about the same problem. We're not together. We're not in the same space. So because we can't hear each other's conversation, we can't bond. So I think I'm a little concerned with having like, where we have cameras where we could watch be in the same room together all day long and have that.
It'll be worse than that. Have you ever heard of a haptic feedback suit?
No.
Well, they're called Tesla suits, technically. If you don't know what they are, they're building them for virtual reality. You wear what looks like a scuba diver suit, and it's attached as like all these like nerve ending like things. I'm not an expert in it, but essentially, if I hit a wall in the virtual world, I'm going to feel it in my bodysuit. And so I can have feeling and touch. Smell is going to be the hardest thing to emulate because smell is thousands of chemicals, but they're going to have feeling and touch probably in the next 10, 15 years. It'll become normal. So.
Can I add a couple of things? The first thing, I really appreciate everybody's input, and I appreciate that everybody came and found time, and people are with us even after the session is over. So I think overall it was not a bad session if people still stick around. I would still really appreciate your feedback because it's very important for us to improve, and I'm sure that some of us are very polite and will not tell the others some things which can be improved, right? Please send them to me. I already received 3 or 4 of those, very helpful. Not necessarily people say that everything is great, but as Mark said, it's important to improve. The second thing is, for me, this is not just about specifically a workplace, about education, about the way people will behave and employers will behave. For me, it is much more of a framework which would help all of us to figure out how to deal with the future, because I don't know of any other discipline which addresses the question of this new interdisciplinary connectivity. When some businesses disappear, others appear, some new trends appeared, and Jonah actually was very instrumental. He mentioned a few of those things which, let's say, I've never heard of. And my belief is that one of the biggest problems of transition is that we don't have a picture of where we're making the transition. And I think future work is that very framework which will allow us to see maybe not the whole picture of the future. By this interaction, we will start seeing the holistic view on the possible moving parts, and the holistic view in one format, with pretty much the same semantics, and therefore we'll start understanding where the real estate will go. And during our discussion, Ivana had a very good point where the real estate is going in the retail space, and where different other industries are going. And that will be of great help to all of us, and will have a very good practical meaning. We're not here just to learn, we're here to make business decisions. And that's what I think and I hope for from this initiative. Thank you.
You are my poster child, Simon.